ADHD, but I keep forgetting to do the thing, and Jamie keeps reminding me.
And now we're live.
Yes, for the perfect context of this,
that
Allie.
was sneaky, Andy.
That was beautiful.
Did you see that? That was very
Gotta
sneaky.
start on time. Gotta start on time. Whatever.
Oh no!
And that's how we roll here and Makers Waffle. Yeah, it's
I'm
like
trying to sneak
partway
that
through
in
the
so that we
pre-chat,
would
we'll
keep
just
talking
start
rubbish.
it live.
Yeah, Andy's got it perfectly down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been
Little
practicing now.
bastard.
But no, I mean,
So-
Ali, I'm essentially Steve's PA for all the stuff that he can't remember. So
Which
I
is
then,
basically everything.
I also
are
can't
you
remember it, so
available?
I put it
Oh, okay.
into, I just put it into a Google Sheets and then just send him screenshots when my phone tells me.
There you go.
I do feel like I need to apologize in advance because I do feel like every time I end out on Maker's Waffle, the conversation at some point turns into a talk about ADHD, and I do not intend it that way. It just always seems to happen, and so I'm sorry, everyone.
Perfectly fine
In
because all
advance.
the other episodes in between you appearing turn into. Do you remember that conversation we had with Ali about ADHD? So it's not just limited to your appearances.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine.
But I'll tell you
but
what,
it
Ali, the number of people who have in sort of messages after the events of you being on and the other podcasts where the ADHD discussions have come up, the number of people who've said, "Oh, that's great that people are talking about it. I need to look into this more because I think these things I can identify with." It's just tremendous. And
Are we wired? I mean, are we predisposed to that?
I think makers possibly are.
Bent?
Yeah.
Or I
I was
think
gonna
ADHD people are predisposed to maybe become
Great.
makers.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it goes the other way. I don't think that
Right.
as makers we're not predisposed to have ADHD, but I think people who have ADHD are potentially predisposed to become makers,
Ooh,
or at least
tell me
the
more.
kind of
Well-
makers that many of us are, where we have workshops and oh, I'm turning the wrong thing. I was gonna say, why did that not turn? Workshops and walls full of stuff. So I forget that I have a camera that's separate from my computer.
And we can always just do
you
that
know,
as well, 'cause,
all the
sorts of
stuff.
shit around me.
So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
that,
connection there.
that being
That's
said,
interesting.
because obviously there was the conversation about ADHD on here, there's a really, like, if you're in the UK and you want to get tested for it, there is a really good link which Jamie is going to put in the show notes because I can't find the link, but I sent it to him because I knew that I wasn't going to remember the link, so I sent it to him to send to me later so I could do it.
Is it the right to choose thing?
Yes.
It is the right to choose thing, and it's the
Yes.
thing that I've sent to Steve at least twice a week for the last 4 weeks.
Sure.
Don't
So
forget.
Steve
Jamie will
mate.
need to send that to me so I can put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Right.
I do feel like I need to go like this a little bit though, because like I'm just like I'm looking at Andy and I'm looking at Dave and I'm like, I'm so sorry, guys. You are not saying a word, and it's probably at least partially my fault. So like there's more than one person here.
We're still
to know
essentially
you
still on
two.
the pre-chat.
Yeah,
So
and whilst
it's just
you're
live.
talking, Andy Birkey's not, so it's fine.
Oh, all right. I see how it works.
There's a lot of shared love between us all here, Ali. And
Yes.
But
we've all
I
insulted
thought
ourselves
Dave had
quite
a
a lot.
silky smooth voice. I want to
does.
hear more of that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know.
On the
Come up
spot.
with something.
on the spot.
Oh boy.
No pressure, but perform.
So I'm fascinated, Allie, though, by your take on the ADHD maker thing, because I've always thought it in one lineal direction, and now you've just 180'd it. Tell me
Yeah.
about where you talk to me more about what you mean, please.
Well, I think that, and obviously, like it's like I feel like this needs like a big like disclaimer bar that I'm not a medical professional. I am just a person with ADHD who has spoken to many other people with ADHD. So this is a lot of a good chunk of anecdotal evidence, I suppose. But there's obviously a predisposition towards wanting to try new things, because obviously the ADHD brain does not create or regulate dopamine as well as the neurotypical brain. So doing new stuff stimulates dopamine. So we like to do new things. And goodness knows that tons and tons of companies and markets have gone, well, if we create coloring books where all the colors are labeled with numbers so that it's very, very easy. We can make a ton of money because that actually, like, that 100% gives people a dopamine hit. And what is that? But that's something creative. Creative things, I think, are really actually a great source of dopamine. So, like, when you kind of put these two things together, you have somebody who thinks outside of the box, because that absolutely is also a thing. I very much feel like, for me, I always feel like I have a TV on in my head that sometimes is frustrating, and other times is actually a source of ideas, because there's just always something kind of going on back there. And so when you kind of combine the need to do things, the need to try new things and get that dopamine hit, combined with a brain that's kind of spitballing ideas kind of like all the time, you can very, very, like, the chances of getting somebody who has ADHD who then looks at something like making or art or something creative and goes, brain says good times if I do this. I'm going to give it a go. And then obviously there's 800,000 different things you can do once you discover this, which means you'll never run out of new things to do. So I do feel like the two things, they work. Making and satisfying the ADHD brain gremlins are things that go really well together. Obviously, there are loads of makers that don't have ADHD, and there are loads of people with ADHD who don't make anything. So it's not a perfect theory, but I do find it very, very, very interesting how many makers I know.
It's a very, very overlapping Venn diagram, I think, isn't it?
Fascinating.
It's enough people to be. I mean, it's enough people to have created a theory, like, which is about as far as I've gotten. Because again,
I wonder if we could go back in history, if some of the kind of sort of major players in the kind of art world, you know, the Picassos, the Monets, etc., were
Da Vinci.
ADHD.
Well, they were certainly many of them were almost certainly neuroatypical of some sort. Yeah, some sort of neurodiversity for sure. Because, like, I just don't know that you come up with really truly. I was gonna say, forgive me. Can I swear on this? I always forget.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Like, really truly batshit ideas. I don't think necessarily come from the minds of people who have super normal, you know, brains and lives and stuff like that. Like, I think those things tend to come from needing to think outside of the box, or again, just having a brain that's kind of like, hey, have you considered unicorns on unicycles? And it's like, no, not until now, but now I am. You know, this is the kind of thing that makes me come up with robotics ideas at 3 a.m. so that I can make a Bill Cipher to put on my wall that talks to people when they walk in the room. You know, like, I don't know that normal people are like that. Normal, you know, neurotypical, you know, people are like that.
That's a good word. I like that word. I'm gonna write it down.
Neurotypical?
I mean, Da Vinci's notebooks, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're
What
crazy.
the heck? You know, dude, helicopters.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, the man was dreaming of flight before, like, there was really electricity or you know, serious machines. So
the rest of humanity is gluing feathers to their arms, and this guy's coming up with helicopters.
Oh, no, it didn't work, but it was a great idea.
Yeah,
I know what else had done it.
I mean, it basically works. You know, close.
I was gonna say, I see lovely people in the audience asking to see Bill Cipher. I haven't actually. I was gonna say that is very much a future project that has not been made, but also it is one that's stuck. It's past the 3-day test, which, if you haven't heard of the 3-day test, is basically where if you have an idea and you still want to do it after 3 days of not doing anything with it, then you can consider doing it for real. Because I have so many ideas that don't pass the 3-day test.
That's where Steve tends to bypass that by he throws that idea out there on WhatsApp, and then we'll remind him 3 days later.
Oh no, that breaks it. You can't tell anyone about it either. You have to actually see if it stays in the brain. But the Bill Cipher the scary Bill Cipher idea is absolutely still there. So I will almost certainly at some point do it, and I will probably also grow to hate it, because it will scare the crap out of me, almost certainly, and my cats, probably, which is appropriate because their names are Dipper and Mabel. So I actually feel like that is the point. Well, specifically those cats, because they're named after the main characters of Gravity Falls, and Bill Cipher is from Gravity Falls, and this all works together. And so if you know Gravity Falls right now, you're probably going, yes, and everyone else is like, what? I do recommend it though. It's a great show.
If you haven't watched Gravity Falls, 100% you should definitely watch it. I convinced 2 of my best friends to name their firstborn child Mabel because of Gravity Falls.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so the cat that will likely show up is Mabel.
Nice.
I was gonna say though, if an orange boy shows up, that's Dipper, but he's a little bit more camera shy. Mabel, however, is not camera shy, so she may or may not show up. I seem to recall though that we actually did have somewhat of a theme, of a topic. Yes,
we do have a topic.
And it wasn't this.
So, for the benefit of the audience who aren't aware, because they probably wouldn't be, although we have I've mentioned it a few times. Essentially, we have assembled this
super team.
What's
Super
trio
team,
to four, a quad of previous guests. Someone say ex-guests, previous guests, to come back on and to have a discussion.
Ex-guests.
Now, the brief has been quite limited in terms of, because I didn't want to direct things too much. And I wonder whether perhaps we may end up kind of going, hopefully not going very long tonight, because I've got booster brain, but more likely might end up going into another chat, because that's the kind of thing we like to do on Waffle, to kind of set things up for
we're good at.
a follow-on chat at some other point. Now, essentially, the brief I've given to our guests when I kind of asked them if they would come back on is for us to have a chat about art, craft, and design. And as simple as that. And sort of, similarities, differences, they overlap, but they're the same thing. Yeah, can one be the other? Can they never be the other? No.
So, I have an opener for 10. Like,
jeez, here we go. It's already started.
All right.
10 minutes? 10 minutes? 10 points? 10 hours?
Yeah, 10 points. So I mean, me and Dave have had this discussion on Instagram a couple of times.
How dare you get a head start?
I just did it to annoy him. It was just to annoy him.
Pretty much. I have a real I will caveat this up by saying I will definitely make some huge sweeping statements, which I definitely don't agree with, but I tend to make them just to prove a point.
Wait! You're gonna make huge sweeping statements that you don't agree with?
Yeah.
Don't become a lawyer. Like ever.
No,
It's a bad idea.
But yeah,
That's what lawyers did. Yeah.
I completely appreciate.
No, you gotta agree with them, I think.
Yeah, that there are huge grey areas within all of this, and there is massive amounts of crossover between craft, design, and art. But one of my biggest pet peeves is is when someone compliments a craftsman or a designer by saying, "Oh, that's art." No, it's not. It's a really, really good piece of craft. It's a really, really good piece of design, because there is this tendency nowadays to use to basically say that art or something, if something is art, then it's more deserving of praise than something that's really well designed or something that's really well built. Like art is up here, and craft and design, that's just a thing that achieves a goal. It's not. There's no thought. There's no anything that goes into it.
Art is highbrow, and everything else is not.
Yeah.
Sorry, I am saying that not because that's what I think. That's the idea.
That's Steve's concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the idea that you're picking up from that statement, or the intended message that they're trying
that's what
to
I think is out there. I think that there's a projection, a kind of universal projection that art is highbrow, or can be highbrow. It's not automatically highbrow, but that art is elite. It is highbrow. It is It is special. You must be talented and skilled and yada, yada, yada. And you don't necessarily have to for craft. Craft is very much here and art is here.
Yeah.
Again, this is not what I think. This is this is what's out there. Though I am very curious to know how everyone here defines, like self-defines. Do you define yourself as an artist or as a craftsperson? I already feel like I might have an idea about Dave.
Okay.
It's
I might have put
what gives it away.
a hint in.
But I could be wrong. And I also think that you can define as more than one as well.
Sure.
So I am curious to know where people place themselves.
I'll quite happily go first because I am 100% through and through craftsman. I am not an artist. I have studied art. I've studied a little bit of art. I love art as a general thing, whether it's something quite traditional like your paintings or your photography or something like that, or whether it's like art house cinema, or whether it's more conceptual sort of stuff. I love performing arts, but myself, I'm a craftsman, and I take pride in what I do, and I think that's probably why I get a little bit defensive about the whole thing of like, oh, it's only well made, therefore it's it's not art, that it's not as important. Like, and it blows my mind.
That's where something like this, it's the axe that Steve made me is a one of a kind piece. That there were two made at the same time.
Yeah,
but it is a one of a kind piece that you've since changed the design of slightly and everything else. So to me, this is a piece of art that you've created. It's also,
but it's interesting because Steve, you're clearly uncomfortable with that because you that's how you started this, was saying that that you think it's not the compliment people intend it to be.
No,
I find that really interesting.
Yeah. See, I don't take that. I don't take it being someone's calling it art as a compliment. I take that as well. It's not art. It's not something that was because to me, I suppose it all depends on how you define art and what art is to each individual. Yeah. So art to me is all about intent. The intent with that axe is not to produce something that's beautiful and wonderful and evokes some kind of emotion or anything like that. It is to produce a tool. Everything else on top of that is a bonus, but its core function is it has to be a tool. It has to serve the purpose for which it was intended, which is it being a tool.
So is that what defines craft or design? The usefulness.
Well,
exactly what I was going to say.
Here's the thing.
No, I like. Well, no, not necessarily. It is just because again we have. I like framing this as not just art and craft, but kind of where design kind of falls into this as well. Because you can easily have shifted this from being art versus craft to art versus design. It would be a very similar conversation. So I do feel like these things all kind of fall in the same area of what is it? There's
three ways of looking at it, or three definitions, I suppose, which is that the fact that it's designed to cut wood, like the functionality of it that's design. It's designed to split wood in a certain way because of the geometry of the blade and everything else. The craft is putting that design into a physical form. So those two work hand in hand. The artistry of it is that's what I mean. There is no artistry involved in that particular piece.
Does that suggest then that anything beyond its designed intent and its crafted function, anything beyond that is then the artistry of it? So if you take it past its point of function, anything else is just art on top.
See, I don't think so. I think that's again, that comes down to design. Anything you go into that, because that's a product. Like that axe is a product. It's a tool to be used. It's not.
You get box art on designed products.
I love how people in the audience are calling you an artist, like almost like against your will. Like, Steve, you're an artist. How dare you?
Point, I think, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to follow on from you guys, I mean, the stuff I do at work is quite often taking someone else's design and sort of crafting it into something that can be used for installation. So something like a design schematic, for instance, that a person on site can take that information and assemble the building that way. But there is art involved in that to be able to assemble it in an aesthetically pleasing way that goes beyond just design. And I haven't done the design of the information that's in there. That's been designed by one of our engineers, and I might then be doing purely the artistic side of fitting that design into something that can be used for utility. So there's overlap in that Venn diagram of the end product anyway, almost by its intent of coming into being. Its form and its function is a combination of all three, almost.
So for my own context, I very much started down a path. I guess say it was not recently, a very long time ago. I was an artist first. I was very much an artist first. I was an artist the first time I picked up a pencil and a pad of paper and I started creating things with it. I started this journey as an artist, and I would later go on to become a designer and eventually a craftsperson as well. So like I very much feel like I have the capacity to be all three. But I definitely I find myself usually going to artist first, but it depends on what I'm doing. So that's kind of, I suppose, the context. But I also definitely agree with what several people are actually kind of saying in the comments about how, whilst I definitely agree that they're different, art and craft are craft also, I think, can be defined very differently, but like crafting something, I agree with like the idea of functionality, very much so. But I also do think that you can have something that is a craft and also is art. And I definitely think that whilst something can be both, that they are different things, and that for something to be both, it has to be embodying things from both sides. Craft, obviously, definitely function and things that are made for a purpose. Yes, very much so. That makes perfect sense. I also think that, that when you do get into the realm of creating a single piece that, particularly, like you were saying, Jamie, has elements that perhaps are not required for the function, something that does simply make it beautiful as well as functional, that absolutely then becomes a work of art. I think there's a lot of little things that make a thing an art, that aren't necessarily all mutually exclusive either. One art.
If I could interject, though, I think, because I saw Steve's reaction to what you said, and it probably, a well-embellished, well-made, crafted piece, okay, becomes art, not in the mind of the maker.
No.
But quite possibly the general population. I will never
the wild
forget,
thing about art.
Right. I will never forget personally, 20 years ago, being on the back end of a big Gothic altarpiece we did. 10 meters tall, full-on thing.
That's big.
And I'll never forget standing there and someone walking in and going, I almost can't say it, but they said, "You're so lucky that you're an artist." And I just remember my skin crawling, wanting to scream and go, I am not proud of the art. If you call this art, I'm proud of the 9 months of work that it took.
You're proud of the craft,
the math of it, and
the design,
the sleepless nights, the design, the earthquake. We engineered the earthquake survivability of this piece. And I'm so lucky I'm an artist. That one hurt. I got to admit. Now,
but also lucky as if it's something you didn't work for as well. Like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
seemed
nothing about that statement was actually very nice, I think.
But I will say that it came from someone who, if they had any inkling that that was offensive, they would be in tears.
Yes,
That was
yeah,
how
yeah,
they
it was
chose to express their appreciation
poorly
for
chosen
what
word,
we've
basically.
done for the last 9 months.
But I mean, that goes back to that kind of highbrow versus lowbrow view of the difference between art and craft, doesn't it? You know,
that,
maybe that
yeah,
was-
that person thought it was a compliment because obviously art is surely what everyone strives for. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, clearly this must be a compliment.
But then, I mean, like I would say, like, so there's an axe maker that I follow who produces some wonderful, gorgeous, absolutely stunning pieces of work, and he embellishes them all with a little bit of engraving, just hot engraving, so just stamping in the steel. I don't consider that art. He doesn't consider that art. He considers that an embellishment on his work. It's part of the design of his piece. So that's why I pulled the funny face when you said about, oh, those little embellishments are what turns it into art. I'm like, no, it's not. That's just good design.
It can.
Good product design.
But then this is that overlap between whether
Yeah.
the art is in the beholder or the creator.
Yeah.
That's the tricky thing with art.
It's
Is
both.
that
Dave,
who finds it.
let's
From our
let's hear from
perspective,
Dave.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we
Andy.
need that Dave get a word in edgeways.
No, no, I said yeah, it can be both, right? It's like it.
Yes.
And the one thing that ties into all you guys are saying is Jimmy just told I think it was Bob on Making It a couple weeks ago. He said that the art is in the process of how you got there. So you can look at it that way too, because Bob doesn't think he makes art, but every creative decision he has to make along the way, kind of turns it. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and that's kind of where I come from a lot, is thinking about like all the different creative things you have to do to create anything, whether it's it could be an axe or a chair, but it's there's art in the process.
I definitely also think that there is really something to be said for doing something and not feeling like it's art at all. Like when you were making it, you weren't necessarily like a sort of, you weren't imbuing it with intent. You weren't necessarily doing this thinking, yes, this is going to invoke an emotional response from people. You're just like, I was doodling and I did the thing and it felt good, so I did it. And that's about the extent of it, and it didn't come out that good, and like it's okay. And so like to you, you're kind of like, this isn't art, this is this is just weekend ramblings effectively in art form, like in a creative form,
Right?
But obviously someone else can look at it and go, oh my gosh, this makes me think of my mother, like blah blah, like that's like things take on creative things really do take on a life of their own once they leave you. Like obviously when it's an idea, it's inside you, it's part of you. And I mean, effectively, when you create something, whether it's digital or physical, art, craft, whatever, you put it out into the world and it stops being a part of you. It now is out there and you have no more control over it. Like genuinely, people are going to think what they think, and they're going to say what they say, and they're going to perceive it in their own way. And one of the things that I definitely think is a wild thing, especially in this day and age where we can put things online and thousands of people can see them in a way that previously you'd have to be like a galleried artist or a master craftsman to have that kind of reach. And once it's out there, who knows what it is anymore? Because there's absolutely things like, yeah, clearly, Steve, you make stuff and you're like, fuck you, this isn't art. And other people are like, I love this. This is the most beautiful art I've ever seen, like it's art to them. And you can't stop them. You can't stop them.
It can stop
it.
But this is the thing, this axe that Steve sent me,
I love that we have the example axe.
But
yeah, it's great.
This is why it's absolutely perfect, because Steve sent me this with the intention of me using it because he saw the shit axe that I was using.
And you're not going to use it ever, are you?
Well, I haven't had the chance to use it yet. So for me, this has literally been a piece of art hung on my wall since it arrived.
Will it still be art after you use it?
That's the question. That was exactly what I was about to ask. Is that at the moment, this is just a beautiful... Well, it's not just a beautiful piece of art. It is a beautiful piece of art. But it is a piece of utilitarian art that will be used.
But I would toss into the mix that I have several tools in my shop that are, older than I am. And the markings of the use by people, from the turn of the century or whatever, I feel like they give it some soul and give it some, if you want to throw it on there, art. It becomes an artful piece in my space, and I need artful pieces to get me going sometimes. So
yeah, it is. That is imbued. That is imbued with like a piece of somebody, and that is beautiful. I don't know. It's funny because I find myself often going back to the word beautiful when I think of art. Like this thing is beautiful, and therefore is perhaps art. And it is interesting because obviously you can have a beautiful chair, or a beautiful axe. Yeah. And does the simple act of it being beautiful make it art? Probably not. But I do find it interesting that I keep going back to this word, beautiful.
But we also clash there with the highbrow, because you get things like a banana duct taped to a wall selling for stupid amounts of money because it's considered art.
Well, that's
I knew that was going to come up at some point.
It's great. That's just it's one
that's my reaction.
Yeah.
So
Dave was saying
it's like one rich guy showing how he can take advantage of other rich people. It's it's still art, but it's
is that not
performance
the
art almost?
It's a different kind of art.
Yeah.
I think definitely a different kind of art.
Because I definitely disagree that just because I don't think that just because something is beautiful, it's art. Because if you get a beautiful chair or a beautiful thing, or a beautiful Jamie, it's a well-crafted, not Birkey, it's a well-crafted piece of design. It's designed to look beautiful. That's again talking about the axes. They were designed to look good. That's part of the design process, is to make sure that this thing is aesthetically pleasing. Art doesn't necessarily have to be aesthetically pleasing.
No, absolutely not.
There is
a lot of it isn't.
I mean, you want to talk about art? Think about architecture. Do you consider architecture to be art? Because there are some phenomenal brutalist buildings. But
I love brutalism.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I freaking love brutalism. Barbican is my jam.
Yeah.
As a guy who works with engineers and deals with architects, I can tell you categorically that everyone outside of architecture views architects as artists, and all of the other trades involved view themselves as engineers, or creative people who do real work, and the artists are just the ones who make it look fancy. There is definite break between architecture being this highbrow, make something look pretty, and then get everyone else to make it work.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example of the whole kind of the way that art and craft work together. I mean, the best example of that is Christopher Dubois, from the Facebook group. His job is to take designs from artists and turn them into physical things. He is the craftsman that enables their vision. So
Caro also does.
Yeah, exactly. It's that whole thing of art is the concept and craft is the execution. So you can have art that is just literally just an idea, a wonderful concept that's maybe not executed quite so well, but at the same time you can have something that's executed fantastically and looked beautiful, but there is no artistic intent with it.
So you're saying that the art itself is the cerebral concept, and any of the execution of it then is craft.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, photography, for example, I love photography. I love taking photos. I love looking at photos. I can take an all right photo, but I'm not artistic with what I do with the photos. Whereas you look at someone like Birkey, he can take a bog standard, just a single tree in a field, and then he'll fuck about with it a little bit, and he'll turn it from
Both the Andes.
I'm gonna go
Yeah.
look for these photos now.
Exactly.
I want to see these photos now.
Steve, I just had a recent excursion with this that throws another factor into this discussion. I was asked to submit some photos to an art show for potential art show, and
cool.
and they needed an artist statement, and I basically
hate
first one, well, not the first, but one of the first ones I've ever done, and I wrote it honestly, which I knew was probably going to sink me as far as getting into this thing, and I said that primarily these photos that you are looking at are a meditative practice.
Yeah.
So in essence, whether or not they're accepted by anybody else, by the time that anybody else sees them, they've already done what they needed to do, because I needed to put myself nearly in a meditative state to get some of those pictures. Probably my classics would be when you're zoomed way in on a dewdrop at sunrise and trying to see a sunrise through a dewdrop, so that you're not looking at the sunrise, you're looking at the dewdrop looking at the sunrise.
Yeah.
At that point, by the time I've taken the picture, it's already done what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Whether or not, I could delete it right then and it's done. That probably didn't go over too good with the committee, because it takes.
Oh, I love it.
It takes the artiness of what they're looking at out of their control to judge. Because I've already said, look,
Right.
I don't care what you think about it, because it's already done its thing. And for me, being kind of rando, doing my own art projects, is such a cool headspace that's different from the real stringent, Gothic stuff I do a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's just pure math, and it doesn't negotiate. Where this whole thing is me opening myself up to my own headspace, which to me, that's almost as pure art as you can get. Is you judge whether it's a success or not before anybody else ever sees it.
Yeah.
So some definitions there are many definitions of art, and one of them is that it's something that is created that generates an emotional or cerebral response. Now, I mean, we could discuss. There's every dictionary seems to have a slightly different version of it, and if we went on the internet, we could probably get a zillion different definitions of what art is. But that's kind of one thing, and the question kind of that comes to mind as I'm listening to you, Andy, is that cerebral response is happened inside your head when you see that, and I get that, because I'm walking down the street sometimes and I'll see a petal on the pavement, and I've got to stop and go back to it. I've walked past it with the dog, and I've literally got to go back, and I feel compelled to take a photograph of it. So, and sometimes that comes out nicely, and sometimes that works out as a really nice photograph. Sometimes it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe my craft isn't always as good as it should be. Yeah, but the response has happened in my head, and I would argue that is an artistic moment happening.
So
because of that response.
Yeah, that's something I find really interesting, because I took a photo in the workshop the other day. There was a hammer that was on one of the sideboards, and just the way that the light was working, it came in, and there was like this shaft of light coming in through from the other room, and it was just shining directly onto this hammer, and it was a beautiful thing, really, really nice. Took a quick photo, and put that, and I think I put it on Instagram and made some comment about it being arty as fuck or something like that, and but to me, that's like, it's not that wasn't art. It was a beautiful moment. It wasn't set up. There was no intention. It was just the fact that it was a beautiful thing to see, and I was like, oh, I want to capture this moment. That moment was, I don't want to say that moment was art, because that moment was the beautiful thing for me. Like
That was what I was going to say. Then is that where the art happened that drove you to use your craft to take the photo to give other people that moment of art?
Yeah,
of seeing your photo, you're seeing what you saw.
Yeah,
I think the craft is in the site. So I think the actual craft is the fact that you have trained yourself and honed your ability to see how the light, texture, shadow,
yeah,
all those factors.
Composition.
Right. Yeah. Composition. Boom.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to say, like, because I used to do some like car photography. I used to go to hot rod shows and take lots of photos of them. And I used to love like getting down low, getting good compositions, getting like one of my favorite photos is it was a photo of a car that was reflected in the hubcap of another car.
Perfect.
And it was like all these really nice shots. But that I remember a friend of mine asking, like, because he used to go to the same shows as me, and he'd take all the same photos, but he'd take it stood up and he'd hold the camera there and just go snap. And he was like, why do your photos always look so much better than mine? Because I understand the craft of photography. But I wouldn't put any of them as being in any way artistic. They're just well crafted.
Or the classic social media comment. What kind of camera do you use?
Yeah.
Whichever one I have, whichever one I'm
Exactly.
holding. Yeah.
My phone camera, it's fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, I don't know, Steve.
Yeah.
I might
I was
have
waiting
some
for that.
bad news for you. I might have some bad news.
Darky as fuck.
You might be an artist.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny, Steve.
I have a
because-
degree in it. All right, like
Yeah.
like you might be an artist.
I think
A
with the
little bit.
photography, yeah.
Like
Okay,
like yeah. Not everyone can do what you just described. Not everyone would see what you saw and then captured. I can agree that the ability to capture it is definitely a craft that you it's a skill you can hone. It's a skill you can train and you can hone. But seeing it
Boom.
isn't necessarily a skill that you can teach yourself.
It's it's
Like,
the way your brain is
You
wired.
saw the image that looked good. Whether it was the hammer on your table, which was a little bit more of like that was more the universe going, here you go. Here's a beam of light on your hammer. That looks amazing. But like at the car shows, seeing the car reflected in the hubcap of another car and then capturing it from the right angle, like it's funny because again, I have an art education, I have an art degree, and in that art degree, they very much taught the things like composition and color and perspective and blah 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 blah. Can you tell I love my education?
Principles of art.
Yeah, including in this case principles of animation because it was an animation program, and so like it went into more niche stuff, and like you can take classes all day. Not everyone is gonna gain that.
Yeah.
Oh God, I really don't want to say the word vision, but I can't think of a better word.
See,
Like
Pretentious,
that
Allie, not
eye.
loud.
That eye. And I just I do have to just chuckle a little bit because I kind of love how determined you are to not do art. You're not an artist. You don't do art. No, it's not what you do. And it sounds like you do a lot of things that aren't necessarily art, like inherently, but also like you might also do some that are. I'm sorry. Yes, I was actually going to say that.
Jovan asked a question
yes.
a little while ago about what gives a person the right to call themselves an artist. But I think that question could be extended to also say, can it be possible that somebody might not call themselves an artist, but other people might look at you and go, you are an artist? I
mean, I think it might come down to creating artsy things.
I like it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that you get to call yourself an artist if you don't make
anything. Yeah.
Anything. Like that feels like a good start. Like you got to make something.
But what about all the artists who come up with a concept and have craftspeople make them? Like we talked before, like like Caro and Chris, who produce the artwork for artists.
You still have to have a way of describing the thing, though, to someone. Like we have yet to figure out brain to brain idea transfer.
Maybe this is another way of defining art. It's a way of communicating some form of vision. Because an artist who can't sculpt,
I like that,
has an
actually.
idea for a sculpture,
I like
and
that.
employs a craftsperson to produce a sculpture.
But they might do a
still have
drawing
to-
of it.
But they still have to find some way of communicating their vision
I
to
like that.
someone else to produce the artwork.
Can
I
I
like that.
back up a little bit? Andy, could you tell me that question again that came up? Because I'm fixated on
the
something.
question. Let me see if I can just get it to scroll back up because it was a little while ago.
And I think I have the answer to this, for me anyway.
So the question is, what gives the person the right to call themselves an artist?
Optionality, or lack thereof. In other words, for years, much like Steve, I refused to acknowledge art as a definition of me.
Okay.
But I don't have the option anymore. I'm transitioning. I'm at the back end of a transition, and I will defiantly call myself an artist now because I don't have a freaking option. I just have to do it. I have to cook. I have to quilt. I have to make Gothic altar pieces. I have to make Breath of the Wild shields. I have,
They are
whatever.
Yeah, you did.
When I go on vacation, I have about 2.5 days until I need to do something. And usually, go to get an Airbnb and that has a kitchen and I can cook. But something. Photography, is very mobile and can happen anytime. But I'm almost jealous of people that can turn it off because I can't. And I'm apologizing less and less for that.
You know what? I actually know 100% what you're talking about. And interestingly enough, I imagine other people in the audience would as well. Because I know for facts, because I know some of these people and I know that they're like this too. So like there's a reason, I think, why I have never been able to stop coming back to making.
Right.
I've tried. I've gone off and done other things in my life, and I keep coming back because of exactly what you described. As sort of like when I don't create, I die a little.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
need to.
I get into trouble.
I think there's something I want to
Because
pull
that
on
creativity goes to,
Yeah.
like hacking and doing, not like computer hacking, but hacking my environment. I go there because of the
Put things in other
creativity.
people's
part of
shopping
it.
carts and things.
Yeah.
I want to pull back on. I want to go back to that in a second. That idea of kind of creativity and things. But JP's just kind of put a question in the chat, which I think is better timed now. Thinking about the angle, should it be the viewer and not the creator decide if the creator is an artist or not?
I think I wouldn't say if the creator is an artist, but if the thing that you created is art, is up to the viewer.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Which might then make the person an artist.
No, they get to decide.
By extension, yes, but
No,
but
100
Yeah.
times no.
Ah.
So
Dave, I think you got more to say, Dave. Go on.
Yeah.
Maybe it's half and half, right? You can call yourself an artist, whether or not anyone else thinks you are, or whether what you make is art. That's their problem. And maybe it's the same thing. Like Steve doesn't want to be an artist, or he doesn't want to say that. Well, the axe, making axes maybe isn't your art, but maybe you do have something else that is your creative outlet that might be art. You know, 'cause
I'm just gonna follow Steve around to the ends of the earth now.
Because I
Steve,
know
even if-
I know the path that he's on. I'm
Yeah.
ahead of him by about 10 years.
Right, yeah. But
You're
everything
going
you do
there,
all
bro.
day,
You're going there. You can't stop it.
yeah, you're always like doing some kind of creative problem solving or something all day long, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not a, you know, and think about the videos you make for the Forge.
We
Absolutely.
didn't even touch on that.
See?
Yeah, I
There's
didn't get
videos.
That just popped in my
Jesus.
head. I can't believe I didn't put that in my notes. But they're at least going in the direction, you know, because even
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're advertising, but they're definitely creating emotions in people for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
that's a very solid point, Dave.
I think like the reason I was quite against the whole idea of like the example being, if you make something and someone sees it as art, then does that make the creator an artist? We've had people say that like the ladles and the coffee scoops that we make, and people have called them art. I'm like, no, they're not. They're a product. They're a thing that we make.
Yeah,
Like,
the factory.
Yeah, like we batch them out by the tens a day sort of thing. Like it's, and it comes back to my initial pet peeve of the fact that they're not like we're not artists for producing them. We're craftspeople and designers. Like they were really well designed and they're really well made. Like you can say that to me as much as you want, and I will take that compliment. I will be more than happy for that. But they're not. Like I think what it is when someone says, "Oh, that's an art. That's art. You're an artist." It's like, well, no, I'm a craftsperson. Like I work my bollocks off.
Do you feel that undervalues your craft?
Yeah. I feel it takes away from. I feel it takes away from both. To be fair, like because it takes away from the design and it takes away from the craft to just go, "Oh, you're an artist." Because, like I say, you can have a fantastic piece of art that isn't necessarily very well crafted.
No, that's very true. That's very true.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Banana and duct tape.
Yeah. And
Surely a big staple would have been better.
but that's what I mean. That's why I get quite finicky about the difference between the two. And
That's a new one.
I don't want to be called an artist for something that I have done as part of my job as a craftsman. Like if you want to call me an artist because of the way that I've taken a photo or because of whatever else, or you know I've made a thing that happens to be really nice, then yeah, fine. But don't. You know, I'm being very general. But don't take away from me the fact that I'm a craftsman. Like that's, to me, that's a much higher compliment than to say, "Oh, that's beautiful. You're an artist."
That's
no, I'm not.
very fair.
Well, it's a lot easier to blow off. So if someone, you know, just intones that you have this magical unicorn ability of being an artist.
Yeah.
Well, and this is super bad of me to think, but the thought has crossed my mind that this is transferring responsibility. So to me, someone sees a piece that you busted your tail on as a craft, right? And they go, "Dang, I wish I was an artist." Well, what that implies is that you have been magically gifted this skill that you just go, "Ah." That also says, I'm so glad that I'm not responsible for that kind of magical ability, talent, art. And that's super not cool to think, I think, but I'll be honest, I don't like somebody having that blow off statement of I'm not responsible for making my life more creative and more busting my butt to learn a craft.
Yeah.
Over, you know, in
is the
decades.
division here between art being viewed as something that you have as a gift inherently, or you don't, versus craft being something that you actively learn and work towards? You know, because Allie having an art degree, you know, that's giving them
costs a lot of money.
Yeah,
but
that's a lot of work too.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, a lot of work, but yeah,
work and effort towards it. So does that then say
the rest of my
that
life.
that any art you produce after, learning to do art as you would a craft, does that take it away from being what someone's definition of art may be, as something that you inherently have or don't have? Maybe that's another distinction that some people have, in that sense of, you can work to learn a craft, but you can't work to learn an art.
An art.
Wait. Say that again, Jamie. You could
As in,
learn.
like, you could learn to do a craft and become.
You can train.
Yeah, you could train to do it, but you couldn't necessarily train to be an artist, because it takes an inherent something that you just either have or don't have.
Yeah.
I think it's something that you can learn to appreciate and understand the rules and the concepts of art, but I think it's kind of one of those things that to really understand it, you do have to have not necessarily an innate ability, but you do have to have that kind of that brain that sees that sort of thing.
You have to be able to look
And
at
that can be trained.
Yeah. And that can be trained, and that can be it's the same as any muscle. You exercise it, you go to art college and you study your things, or you produce more art and you train yourself, and that will help you become a better artist. And it depends on what your vision of what art is as well. Like if you want to be the kind of artist that can evoke a certain emotion, you can become really well trained in that. And that then combines with a craft, whether that's videography, whether it's pottery, whether it's photography, whatever, and you combine the two to showcase that tiny little gem of creativity and ability. And I think everyone has that. It's just the fact that whether or not people
find
have the ability to recognize it within themselves.
Okay, so now I have a question, because I feel as though like I in my head I have like everyone kind of like their names and like the stuff they've been kind of saying, and I feel like you have mentioned many things, Steve, that art is not. I would like to know how you, as an individual, how do you define art? What is art? I have a good idea of what it isn't. What is art to you? Obviously, to you.
Not even an hour in, and she's already got you sussed, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So- And you know how earlier on I said that I will definitely make sweeping statements that I don't agree with, and I will contradict myself multiple times within conversation. But
I'm remembering all of it.
yeah. So to me, art is. I mean, there's the traditional kind of fields like you're painting, but again, I don't think painting, like just because someone's really good at painting a portrait, I don't necessarily makes them an artist, because again, that's a craft.
You look at a thing, you replicate the thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like sculpture. I love really especially some of the classics. Fucking incredible craftsmanship that goes into it. Whether it's any real artistry goes into it, you're just replicating what someone looks like. I don't think that's. I think for me, art is taking something and taking a starting block and a concept, whether that concept is an emotion, an idea, or whatever, and combining the two to make more than the sum of its parts. So taking something and changing it, and however you want to change it, whatever materials you want to use, but doing something that invokes a response that's not just that thing's really pretty, or that thing looks like that person, or whatever.
It's interesting, because I kind of feel like by your definition, Picasso is more of an artist than Da Vinci, because Da Vinci's work is largely realism.
Yeah.
And arguably was created by looking at a model and recreating it in stone or in paint or what have you. Whereas Picasso's stuff is splashes of color, and it's people that have been turned into blocks, and it is so vastly different from reality. Am I in the right vein?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but then to be fair, like I do have a habit of contradicting myself quite a lot.
Well, we've noticed.
No, honestly, I think this is all super fascinating. I'm not necessarily trying to build an argument against you by any means. I'm actually like, I'm really enjoying this. I'm taking tons of stuff in, and I'm kind of like,
Allie, don't worry, we've got that covered.
All right, good.
Because one of the things I was thinking about when I was walking the dog earlier on today, I was thinking about this conversation, and I was thinking about the fact that I love what Birkey does, and I love like the craft that the craftsmanship that he puts into his work, but I love the artistry that he puts into his photography as well.
But is that separated?
Yeah, I think so, because like you said, like the job that you do, the stuff like the restoration stuff, it's craftsmanship, it's you said yourself, it's mathematics, whereas the art, the photography side of it is more kind of conceptual. But one of the things I was thinking about is like with 3D printing, so there obviously, you know, if you 3D print a thing that you're going to use, like I was trying to think of an example then, and all I've got on my thing at the moment is
name a thing. I can probably grab it and it's 3D printed.
I was say I've got hundreds of little dickosauruses dotted around the house from last time Jamie was here. But
I'm not going to apologise for that.
I've actually been asked to print a massive one for the tattooist. But so if you like, and again, I think this is where the craftsmanship argument comes in. Like if you design something, it's a really, really interesting, wonderful sculpture, whether it's, you know, something that just evokes an emotion, and it's a beautiful 3D object, and you print out beautiful. Yeah,
told you, just grab something within grabbing range.
You so if you print that out, I would say again, it's the designer that's made the art, if you were.
Yes. But I am not the artist here.
Yeah.
I literally just pressed some buttons. Like I did not design that. It's not my art.
Yeah, but there's craft that goes into 3D printing it.
Yes.
And because that's one of the things that I've had to explain to people so many times is 3D printing is not easy. It's really not easy. Like you have to know your shit.
I love that people keep telling me that like this stuff is 3D printing stuff is really hard. This thing is really hard, you know, and I'm just kind of like, I mean, okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it currently, and I'm pretty good at it. So sure.
In much the same way stonemasonry or anything else is. If you don't know what you're doing, it's all
Mabel. Yeah. This is Mabel.
Hi, Mabel.
Hey, Sweet Pea. You come to say hello.
I've completely forgotten now. What was I going to say?
3D printing is craft, but not necessarily art.
Yeah. But then, so one of the other things that I quite like about art is the fact that it can be, you can experiment with the materials as well. So using it in different and unusual ways, which again, is that necessarily art, or is it just a different aspect of the craft?
Arguably, it's a little science.
Yeah.
I've stayed quiet.
Sorry, just to mess everything up. Just to mess it all up. Yeah. No, it's arguably that starts to go into science as well. But
but then I suppose you could say that of pretty much any craft is because you're talking about like the material science of it all.
Right? Yeah. Actually,
where's it? It's all physics.
Oh yeah, right. Everything's physics.
God damn it! Yeah, this is rapidly going to just devolve into everything is science and
again.
I want to go back to the kind of artist declaration, whether you say you're an artist or whether somebody else says you're an artist, and throw in another little sort of spanner, perhaps.
Do it.
Yeah, can you perhaps regard yourself as a craftsperson that occasionally makes art?
Absolutely.
Yeah, why not?
Yes, of course.
I like to say I live in the gray
world. One thing we all agree on.
The gray, murky world between craft and art. That's where I live.
I like it.
And nobody likes me. Neither one of those two groups like what I do.
Right.
I mean, there are crafts people around here that do not want to hang out with me. There's a whole bunch of
you.
You're too creative. Yeah.
Thanks, Allie. That's cool.
You seem cool. You're also probably far away.
Yeah. But I will say, to me, that's where the magic happens, man, because a lot of these things are barriers that are erected by other people or by ourselves to protect ourselves. And to me, if you can be in that fog where you can't see the fences, just go with it. Go full bore. You'll run into something that'll stop you eventually. Bounce off it and go in a different direction. Boom. You're all of a sudden, for me, there was just this point where all of a sudden you realize that there are no rules and it's a magical place. Talking about unicorns and stuff. There's no rules.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
I got super excited then, and I was about to write it down because I was worried I was going to forget it. But I think I might have just figured out why I dislike the whole calling craftspeople artists thing.
Fucking breakthrough! Come on.
Because bringing it back to what we were saying earlier on about like the whole like artistry being an innate ability that you can train, but everyone, you need to have some kind of talent there. I think when people turn around and say, "Oh, you're an artist," it makes doing what I do seem unachievable, and it's not. Everything I do is easily achievable by anyone if they put the time and effort into it.
And in that vein, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
and that's what I was saying, Steve, about this sort of blow off.
Yeah,
if I call you an artist, I don't have to be responsible for that work that you did.
Yeah,
to make yourself whatever level you're at.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it's like, and when people say, "Oh, I'm an artist," it feels like it's gatekeeping. It feels like it's something that's not achievable.
Yeah,
and pretentious gatekeeping to undervalue skill and time learning a craft.
Exactly. And I mean, you, Jamie, you know full well how I feel about gatekeeping, but it's such a fuck. That's completely blown my mind because that's just made everything make so much sense.
That is therapy.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
We've invited Steve here just purely for this intervention.
Yeah, we had to get him to.
That's basically what this is an intervention for Steve. Dude, I have been there. I like I say, I'm up ahead of you on the path that you're on.
Yeah.
And
Steve, are you the youngest one here?
No.
Yes.
Oh, he is, isn't he?
Oh no! Do we have? Did everyone have
3 days?
3
days younger than me.
Wow. 3 days.
Same age as us, Allie.
Okay.
Wait, Allie, when's your birthday?
July.
Fuck's sakes. Yeah.
But you're 86 too, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
but that makes you the youngest. What are you doing?
If you're July 86,
yes,
then you're the youngest.
What? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a change. That's a change.
Boom.
I'll take it.
I just love the fact that I'm not the
oldest
for
Not
once.
the oldest, right? That's why you invited the other Andy.
I'll take that mantle.
Can I help you?
But yeah,
it's kind of funny because I just messaged Allie before we came on an hour or so, and I saw that one of the things we have in common.
Nice.
One of the things we have in common is a video game called Zelda Breath of the Wild, and for me, this is a perfect example of. I just made a shield that's in this video game. I don't even remember how or why I started doing it. It was purely an exercise for love of this particular game. But I realized that I was using the same observational skills that I use with a jeweler's loop and, 200-year-old photos of Gothic stuff. I was using the same, and I know I saw the same thing in Allie's work as it related to this video game, was just this. There are detailings that are obvious to me because that's what I see. That's what I have to see. That you know, I mean, anybody wants to make anything from a video game, I am so all about it. But when you see some work like this one over here, it's incredible what, Allie, what you do with that level of detail. And to me, that's where the art part comes in. And again, I hate to beat a dead horse, so to speak, but the seeing, it starts with the seeing. And the seeing, you know, we get back into this gray area of seeing is an acquired skill. I feel like there's some savants, Elon Musk style, that can see things in time and space that we can't. And I think
it comes more easily to some people than others.
absolutely,
Especially if they're not.
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
It's not necessarily that you can't learn it, but that it does come more easily to some people than others.
Yeah, I used to have a student who was a musician, most amazing violinist, one of the best I've heard, and he will no doubt go on. I think he's still in school. He's probably left school now. He's probably at university, and he's probably somewhere like Guildhall in London, and he's probably there on sort of scholarship. Superb performer, perfect pitch. Yeah, play a note. He'll tell you what that note is and whether the piano's off key. So there is that innate sort of talent, but that talent has also been backed up by the fact that since he was about 3, he's been practicing for 6 to 8 hours a day on his violin every day.
It's never just innate skill and then no practice. Like, that's
Well, I mean, then we get into practice with intent, because you can practice and practice and practice at something without making any progress.
Yeah. Which
it's
frustrating.
Having that direction for the practice and the knowledge to go through.
Yeah, and that's the problem with Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you're not actually practicing with intent, if you're not actually taking steps to make improvement,
then you are potentially doing anything.
You won't necessarily get better. Yeah.
Well, you know, it.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's one of the things that we kind of say a lot to a lot of our other friends that are learning blacksmithing, is like it's all well and good putting time in at the anvil, but if you're holding the hammer the whole time, then you're never going to improve. Like it's about knowing that like the improvements that you actually need to make. So I think practicing is all well and good, but you need some kind of direction, which is where something like taking it back to the artistry thing, like having that innate eye for art, or however you want to phrase it, is all well and good, but going to art college or studying art in whatever way you do it is beneficial, and that's what helps you go from being someone with a bit of an artistic eye to someone that's actually able to reliably produce art.
As much as I often regret going to art school, I can't deny that it did 100% teach me some incredibly valuable skills that I use all the time. I just wish it had cost less. Really. That's the big the big one. But there was something though earlier, kind of in line with the calling oneself an artist and being an artist, and there was something you said, Andy, about, gosh, I can't remember what it was now. I can't remember what it was, but the thing that it made me think of was like I both hold on to the title somewhat fiercely because I was told repeatedly as a child that I couldn't or shouldn't be one. Right. And so I obviously had to take it upon myself to prove everyone wrong. Hence the going to art school and then subsequently graduating at the top of my class, so that everyone could know how incredibly wrong they were. Sorry, I just realized I'm rolling on top of my microphone cable. Not so good. So it's something that like, and not to mention the fact that there's so much gatekeeping. There's so much gatekeeping. I think that maybe that was actually the thing. There's so much gatekeeping, and because of that gatekeeping, it is something that I feel like I do hold on to somewhat fiercely. At the same time, I pretty much almost exclusively do not get on with other people who define exclusively as artists. Now, people who define as artists and craftspeople, or artists and designers, or artists and maker, no problem. No problem. But people who are artists, I'm not welcome. But much in the same way, this is, I think, what you were saying, Andy, about how you feel like you're in between. You're in between worlds. You're in between groups of people, and yeah, that because when I was an artist at art school and all of that, I frequently felt like I did not fully belong. Now it was made better by the fact that it was a bunch of friggin' nerds, because again, I was in a program that was teaching people, how to do 3D art for video games and stuff. So it was a bunch of nerds, which meant I got on with them okay. But the kind of the hoity-toityness of art has never I can't play that game, and so in spite of the fact that I will fight for the title, and I also feel like I have it. I don't feel like I have to necessarily work that hard for it, because I do think that I qualify. Again, we're still struggling to define it, but at the same time, I also don't necessarily want to associate at the same time, because of the gatekeeping, because of the elitism, because of the rigid definitions. Because I think more than anyone else, artists will define art very rigidly. Yeah, it's got to meet these things, and I maybe that's why I prefer to define art more loosely, because I want people to potentially feel like they can create it. Right. I actually just did a talk about this to children, in fact. Yeah. Excellent. I did a talk with the Girls into Coding group for one of their events. Oh, yeah. And they're focused exclusively on 10 to 14-year-olds, which is a really, really good age, because you're smart enough to understand more complex concepts, but you're still very spongy in the brain. And my talk was very much about how art and technology are not they're not complete opposites to one another. Right. And I found myself using a lot of electronics projects, a lot of projects with that are primarily electronics based, as great examples of where art and technology can meet. That's awesome. Because these were things that were, to me, they were undeniably artistic. But they were also made out of microcontrollers and LEDs and servos and stuff. Yeah. And the thing that felt like the important thing to me was to communicate the idea that if they are so inclined, that they can make art, and they can use technology to do it. Yeah. And using technology does not make it less art. That was also kind of a key thing, because I do think a lot of times people, when they think of art, they think of the painter, painting in oils or sculpting in clay, because that's real art or something. Right. And it's nah. I mean, yes, it's art, but these things over here are also art. Yeah. And this thing over here, generative art created with a pen plotter, that's art. And so I listed a ton of examples, and the idea was just to communicate a sort of if you want to, you can create art. There's no fuck the gatekeepers. Yeah. Go and do an art. Because like I said, I had the opposite. Yeah. So,
because I think a lot of people stop because of the fear of judgment. I did. Yeah. Definitely. But especially kids at that age, Allie, I would imagine, are so vulnerable to that, because that's their world. To me, the kind of the flip side of that judgmental type of thing is when I mean, he's here with us, so I'll go ahead and put Dave on a pedestal here. But I take a picture of a bird in a tree. Something in that picture has an artist, a guy who I recognize as an artist, Dave, contact me and say, hey, I'd like to take that image and make something completely different out of it. Are you cool with that? And to me, that is probably more validation for my art in that moment than anything I could have scripted.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's like game recognized game. Like, that's basically what that is. And that's the best thing. That is the best thing.
I as you were talking about the whole thing of like art in electronic form and all of that, I couldn't help but think I wish I was better at remembering actual quotes, but there's in one of the Terry Pratchett books, there's
I can't remember it.
There's two of the guardsmen talking about art, and basically one of them was dating someone that was an exotic dancer, and they were discussing the difference between an exotic dancer and ballet, and why one is art and one definitely isn't. One is bad because it's people
because boobs. Let's be honest.
Exactly. Well, and the only thing that the person arguing against it could come up with to define the difference between the two as being art and not art was, well, with ballet there's urns and there's potted plants, and that's what and that's how ridiculous trying to define art is. Like it's like I realized that I defined or vaguely.
Yeah, you never did answer my question.
Yeah, no, I did. I don't.
You gave more things that it wasn't.
Yeah, but that's
and then you said you would contradict yourself.
We've got several more million things to work through, Allie. The definition. Once we've ruled everything else out on the planet.
It's okay. I get the impression
you can't easily define it. It's not.
I get the impression that Steve can teach me blacksmithing. So, like, obviously, we can continue to work on this while I learn how to blacksmith.
Yeah,
perfect.
Love it.
Solid.
Right. So, saying that, right? Here's a question for you, all of you, actually. I have heard people before. They have said that you can be artistic, but you shouldn't consider yourself an artist unless you understand the whys. So, because I'm quite hot on the idea of I like to understand why. So that whole thing of like, again, going back to that the shot of the car and the hubcap. So why is that an interesting shot? Why is that? And understanding, because you said about it with going to art school and learning so many things that were helpful to help you define how you were doing things and understand the mechanics of art and what makes something art. So if someone understands that, are they an artist? Whereas if someone doesn't understand that but can still produce a quality of work but can't necessarily define why it's art, are they still an artist?
No. I actually can answer this one. What you're talking about is artistic literacy.
Yes.
And artistic literacy is actually something incredibly important that many people don't have, including some artists. And it's part of the reason why art is actually so, or not even just art, creativity is so undervalued today, is because so many people lack artistic literacy. They don't understand what goes into making something. And so to them, it doesn't have a value because they don't actually understand what makes it good or what goes into making it. So like artistic literacy is not necessary. Artistic literacy does not make you an artist. But it is also something that's, I think, incredibly important. And I do think that to be an artist without artistic literacy is going to be interesting. I think it's possible, but I do think it would make things tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, artistic literacy is super important. Super important.
Sorry.
Yeah, but
I couldn't have asked for a better answer. That was perfect.
I think that's really interesting, though, isn't it? Because I mean, I think about, for example, when I was in school, at that particular time, it was not fashionable to teach students studying English in-depth grammar. So
Interesting.
yeah, we did nouns, we did verbs, we did adjectives, and that was it, pretty much. There was hardly any more grammar than that. Far less than is taught nowadays. It was just a period in education in the UK when grammar was not taught. Now, there's still huge amounts of grammar that the technicality of it I don't understand. Yeah, frontal adverbial thingy bob what's it? It's the sort of thing that kind of people have kind of in the Daily Mail kind of rant about. Why should 11-year-olds have to know what a frontal adverb or whatever it is? And it's like I kind of for once I actually agree with the Daily Mail.
Don't say that.
Which
Don't
is probably
say that.
it's the only time
They're gonna drop out of the sky.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
I like to think that I'm pretty good at writing. I can write copy. I can write essays. I've won awards for essays, and I've had commendations from people that are kind of analysing kind of things that I've written, and I've been kind of commented on that I'm pretty good at writing things. But I perhaps only understand the ability. I have that ability to write well, not because I necessarily understand the terminology, the jargon associated with grammar and the good use of English, but because I've read thousands and thousands of books and thousands of articles and newspaper articles and essays and the like.
So it's more pattern recognition almost.
Yes.
Or applied pattern recognition.
I mean, I think what you described is literacy. Like you have literacy in this. You
But
might not have
I couldn't
ultimate
explain
mastery.
that. I couldn't if I went to say university to study English literature, which would be a nightmare of a thing to do for my mind. I wouldn't do well. I probably wouldn't pass. If they kind of said, explain the use of. I can't even come up with the terms because I just don't know them.
I guess this is why they like teachers having high level degrees. I do think there's a difference between literacy and mastery. And I feel like what you're describing is mastery, like the ability to understand a thing so well that you are able to turn around, explain it, not just to somebody else who knows a lot about it, but potentially explain it to somebody who knows nothing, and then also teach it.
I suppose that's where you have like literacy, competency, and mastery. You can be.
That's better. That is better. Because you can be competent.
I'd almost tossed in the concept, perhaps, of conceptual literacy, in that there's a potential for literacy to happen at a level that is not completely comprehending the concepts that underpin the whole thing that you're trying to deal with, which goes back to, should I be able to ask why, or should I be able to manipulate the viewer into asking why or what, or just thinking, just simply dropping out of their grocery list that they have in their mind for a millisecond. To me, especially with a still image, that's all in our world. That's all I can expect, but that's a success. If I can do that much of a neuron transmit, that's a good photo.
Yeah. Doing a big old heckin' neuron transmit.
Neuron transmit.
No, actually, I know exactly what you mean. I don't mean to make it sound trite. That's so much of it is just like that. I got to get this thing from my brain out of my brain. How do I get it from point A to point B?
And part of it for me, selfishly, is a curiosity between those two whys, Steve. why I saw it that way, and if anybody else will see it that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And knowing full
Am I
well
alone in the world?
yeah, exactly. Again, but
I think we're getting too philosophical.
Probably. I have a tendency to go there.
We're drifting very close to modern art, I think, here as well.
Yeah.
Of, you know, is my definition of what we're seeing the same as someone else's definition of what we're seeing?
No, honestly,
that comes back. Sorry, that comes back to kind of an earlier point that I made. Yeah, is the definition of artist, and we can think of this in a slightly different way. But it's the definition of artist imposed by the person who does the creation, or by the person who takes in the creation.
Yes.
Because I've been to gallery. I don't go to galleries a lot, but I've been to kind of galleries, and you kind of look at something and you go, nah. I don't get that. I don't understand the art. I can appreciate the craft of producing that, but I don't get that as a piece of art. And I wonder, perhaps when you go somewhere like the National Portrait Gallery, where there's a lot of portraiture, and how much of that is perhaps art or just craft, because that was the medium by which people were recorded, which goes back to sort of Steve's point.
But so that brings up another question for me then, in that sense of, if you were to look at something like the Tate versus the Tate Modern, something that is classical art versus modern art, and if you were to look at something that is, essentially by Steve's definition there of being craft because it is a tool and medium replication of something that you could see, to something that is essentially craft but then becomes art, not by you viewing the piece itself, but by you reading the definition, that like the artist's statement about the art piece. You might walk into the room and go, what is this pile of rubbish? Might even be a literal pile of rubbish.
I have done.
Yeah, that's
And then you read the statement, and then the statement makes that piece become art. When you understand the vision that artist had,
yeah, you understand it.
The intent.
that then it's the artist's intent that makes the piece art versus the craft of making the art itself.
Yeah. So, because I mean that again, that kind of comes back to the point I made earlier on about the intent, and I think intent has a huge part to do with it, and whether people, let's say, agree with the intent or not doesn't really matter. It's as long as they understand that intent was there. But it's funny because, as you were saying about the Tate versus Tate Modern, my head just wandered off, as it sometimes does, and
tune out.
Because I was thinking about street art, and I fucking love street art, but again, like by my own definition, a lot of that comes down to that's craft and design. It's not necessarily art, but I would 100% define most of what I say as art. And like I said, I fully appreciate that I contradict myself constantly, and but I'm a massive hypocrite, and I'm okay with that. So I had to do
as long as you're okay with it,
as long as you admit it, yeah.
But yeah, like I like walking around Bristol, there are some fucking gorgeous pieces of street art that I can quite happily just stop what I'm doing, just stand, sit, take a minute, just look at it, and
spent many hours doing the same.
Yeah,
cool.
And what I love is they change the environment that they're in. They do more than just, it's more than just a pretty picture on a wall. They change the feel of the city. They change the feel of that area. They, in a weird way, like some of the huge, massive, like 60-foot murals that are painted up, they make you feel more comfortable. They make you feel more safe. They make you feel like it's an inclusive area. I mean, obviously, not all street art is like that. Some of it is just tags.
Someone's tag on the side of a train track.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of that is where the guys that are doing the huge pieces, that's where they started.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
It's the training. To pardon the training.
Yeah, exactly.
Developing their craft.
Yeah, pretty much.
One thing I saw that was interesting was someone on Instagram. I follow way too many people, but it was someone most people would call an artist, and they said that a lot of times they make the art first. They don't know what it's supposed to be or what the meaning is. It's just they have to make it. It's just whatever the idea, and then the concept and the interpretation, the intention comes out like after people look at it. So it's not always a linear process.
Yeah.
And that's
more astute.
It's interesting, Dave, because I was kind of thinking about that as well. That sort of like because I can get on board with like the art isn't the intent as a general concept until you start to think about art that's created without intent.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, is that no longer art? And like, I guess that's well, and I guess that's the funny thing about, that's why it's easier to say what art isn't than what it is, because the second you start defining what it is, you start to limit it. Right. And I know certainly for me, I feel like I could sit here and I could list a bunch of things that I feel like are good kind of general rules for like defining art. But I know that the second I would say it, I would think of an example that broke that.
Exactly.
And like the intent one is such a good example because, like, yeah, absolutely, to a degree, like an intent can define something as art, absolutely. But what about all the things that you create the thing without any intent? Because again, I absolutely have, and sometimes maybe like that intent is like what Andy was talking about earlier. The like, I need to get this thing out of my head. I need to make this thing. I need to create this thing, and I don't know yet what it's going to be or what the purpose is. But I need to do it, and that's about the extent of it. Creating for the sake of it or for the joy of it, as opposed to convey a particular feeling or intention or whatnot, is valid, and therefore it can't, like, it's hard to create the definition, because the second I start to think intent, that defines art, right?
It's sort of like,
but the questioning of that is the most defendable. The second you stop defending your take on this, you start becoming a sort of a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So the fact that Steve is, hey, I'm a wicked hypocrite, to me tells me that he's still actively processing. Which to me, that's the magic. I mean,
I've definitely been processing this for a good decade and a half, 2 decades or so. So I don't expect to be done tonight.
I was hoping we'd have all the answers.
But there's a lot of art gatekeepers, if you want to call them, that the defense of their ego dictates that they have a very rigid definition.
If you redefine their art, you undervalue it, don't you? You undermine. If you redefine their art, you undermine what they view as art. You undermine their art in their eyes.
I mistakenly one time told somebody that I see the world differently than you, and what I meant to say is, I see the world differently than you. What he heard was, and that's way superior to the way that you see it.
Yeah.
Right. I see the world differently than you, and also my way is better.
That's right. That's the difference between the intent and the interpretation,
Right.
Yeah.
So I try to be hypersensitive to that, not inferring judgment as much as I hate to get judged.
Yeah, for sure.
That's sort of a one man's utilitarian axe is another man's hanging on the wall art piece.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
No.
No.
I figure Steve lost control of that axe the second that he put it in the post.
He did.
I think the
You know what I'm
second he
saying?
decided to
I
make
mean,
it.
that's how I have to deal
Yeah.
with my stuff in churches. What
Right.
they do with it after I cash that check,
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they?
as a craftsperson,
Mhm.
look, I got paid. And
Yeah,
that's a
man.
real cynical way of looking at it, but that's how I have to deal with it.
Right.
I walked into an altar piece that I did again and spent months on. 6 months later, a priest had stapled Christmas lights to it.
Oh, goodness.
Stapled.
Yeah.
Wow. That's art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
And
put
I
staples in it.
walked in and I just remember having this rise of anger and then going, no, dude, you can't do that.
No, it's not
It's
yours anymore.
it's theirs.
So did
And
you use
whatever they do
matches
with
or
it-
like a blowtorch to burn the place down?
It was an explosive device of some sort. I don't remember which.
Maybe.
But,
Maybe
I mean,
that's what it was.
That's kind of the nature of humans in general, though, isn't it? You know, one person's statement when they speak something to an individual or to a group. You know, I suppose perfect example is here in this instance. You know, if one of us says something, the other 5 people in the group are all going to interpret that in their own way. So there are 6 different interpretations at least of whatever words come out of someone's mouth. You know, and I suppose that's the same thing with any created piece, whether it's art or whether it's craft or whether it's a sandwich or whatever. You know, if one of us made 6 sandwiches and handed them all out, we're all going to have different reactions to those sandwiches as well. You
Yeah,
know,
mine
that's-
and Andy's is going to be really bad, probably.
That's
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Anybody who's, yep.
Gluten intolerance.
Unless it's gluten-free bread, in which case the other 4 will have
Yeah,
very bad
exactly.
reaction to it. They'll go, what is this stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it so dry and falling apart? What's going on?
You make some really good gluten-free cookies. That's one thing you can do that you can solve that
I don't
problem.
want cookies. God
It's,
damn.
it's, you know, it's definitely a lot of butter and or other types of fat.
That sounds
So-
terrible.
Save it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Gluten-free
You know
Welsh
what?
cakes work perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I can but think of one thing, one defining factor that I would actually feel confident saying is required for art.
Is it urns?
rigid parameters. Woohoo!
Yes.
Earns, yes, earns. No, you have to make it. You have to make it. I think that's it. Because I do, and I will say this again with the weight of my art degree behind me, that I think found art is bullshit. I think Michael Duchamp can suck it, and that a toilet found on the street is not art. That is a toilet.
What if you tape a banana in it?
No. See, like that's it. I think that like it can be turned into some sort of performance art, sure, but like taking a thing and saying that's art that you did not make and you have done nothing to. You can take the toilet and change the toilet and add stuff to the toilet and paint the toilet and then the toilet's art. But if you just take a toilet,
well, you take a photograph of it.
Then the photograph is art,
Yeah,
but the toilet
yeah.
is not.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to
Sorry,
make
Dave.
something. You have to create something.
I was just gonna say Jamie has to paint the axe,
Yeah.
and
fine.
then it's art.
Yeah.
There we go.
done.
Well,
Then it's Jamie's
I've
art.
added
Then it's
I've
Jamie's
added
art.
natural patina to it by leaving it on the wall in the sun.
Yeah.
And stroking it.
so-
Yeah.
So, because
Yeah.
one of the things that that I've said about the stuff that we do, like again going back to the ladles, and people calling them art. I'm like, no, they're not. They're products. They're not art. But someone said, oh yeah, but you know the product photos we've got. Oh well, they're art because it's they're nice still life. No, they're product photos. They're done by a craftsman for that. If you
Right,
want to
to
take an
sell it.
artistic photo of it and have that, and the photo would be the art.
Right.
It would not be the ladle, it would be the photo.
What would make a good artistic photo and what would make a good product photo are definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Yeah.
Um,
But
A
you
good
can't
artistic
define
photo
it.
could be, but
yeah. But can I ask one quick question, Ali, with regards to your definition? When you say that you have to make it, do you mean you yourself have to make it, or can it be something that you've commissioned someone else to make? So can you commission a craftsperson to make something based on your design, a la
Then
Shadow and Chris.
Art fabricators, yeah.
so, but you still made something. You still made the concept.
Yeah.
It's
You
communicating
came up with
that
the
concept of
concept.
Craftsperson,
You
isn't it?
created a thing. Still, you
Yeah.
created a concept. Again, this is obviously not everything that is made is art. Like again, like this is
Yeah.
that's not what that means. It's simply
no.
we are struggling to define art. And I definitely think saying it, that it must be like something must be created. I feel like is again, I feel like that's as far as I can get before I start to read stuff where I'm just like, nope, that doesn't qualify.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Therein lies the
because-
question, though, because if you create the concept of why a piece of, a piece of found art is then art, the toilet at the side of the street itself might not be the art, but the concept and the intent around why that is art could then potentially be the art in itself.
The description is the art.
No, I don't know.
But by a
definitely
modern art
think that-
definition, it could be, because
Right.
it's-
I think that's the
it's-
whole point of that type of art is that
It's performance
you're-
art or descriptive conceptual art.
Yeah. You're coming up with a new way to think
Murky
about it.
waters.
Yeah.
I
It's
I feel
firing
like
those neurons up.
that's more marketing than art.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
Like-
I've always felt things like Tracy Ennings, that crazy room, probably before most of you were born actually, she produced a room that was just basically a typical older teenagers, because they were used condoms on the side,
God, we
sort of
hope.
bedroom, which was just shock art. And for me, there was no element of art to it.
Sounds like a political statement to me.
Yeah.
Like that
Possibly,
sounds like
yes.
a
It's
statement.
potentially it's
more
that.
than art.
I don't know what the artist statement was that went with it. It wasn't
I guess
something
that's
that
it.
I enjoyed looking at to even kind of take it further. But yeah,
Yeah, I
feel
definitely
sometimes
think
that there is this
for
element
my
of-
definition, there is
it's almost
the
like
making has to be involved.
performance. It's the kind of art is such a widespread thing. It's a
Yeah.
term that is used to cover so many things in so many
Culinary art.
ways without clear definitions. There's that some people say
no.
art shouldn't be something that is practical. If it can be used, it's not art. But there
Yeah,
is
yeah.
functional art.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one could argue that if you make a painting, it's not functional. Well, if it covers my TV that I don't want to see all the time, if it's made, it's covering a set of speakers and hiding them, and or it's covering my safe buried in the wall.
Yeah,
then,
the lines
well, that
between
has to
form
be
and function can be blurry,
Yeah.
arguably.
All the lines.
So
are
it-
blurry.
Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
that's the problem, isn't it? It does really feel that way, because it's so funny, because there's so many things that Steve, that you have said that I've gone like, yeah, actually I can get behind that. Looking at somebody and drawing them, like is that art? Is that art? But like, again, I very much find that I don't want to say that it isn't, if only because I don't want to become the gatekeeper.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's actually the thing, because like genuinely, like I've been sat here and I feel like I'm like, yeah, I could see where that wouldn't count as art. That's craft instead, and that's somebody's craft with the medium, and not necessarily art. And it's interesting because I found myself going through my own works and almost going, okay, that's not art, that's not art, that's not art, that doesn't qualify, nope.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't like this game anymore.
So what we've done
Like-
tonight, this intervention tonight has de-arted the artist and re-arted someone who's tried not to be one.
Well, but again, it's one of those things that I find myself like kind of going back to like the idea of like I can create something that again to me doesn't feel like art, and someone else will be like, oh my gosh, like that's a beautiful work of art, and I'm like, okay, sure,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you think it is.
yeah,
But
it's
there's that element of if I think I've mentioned this before. I stopped studying art as a subject in school, age 14, because I had a limited number of options that I could choose from. At the time, you could only choose 8 options at the school I was at, and other subjects that I was deemed to be better at or were deemed to be important for me were ones that I had to choose. And art, which was a subject that I enjoyed, I didn't enjoy things like painting, but I loved pen and ink. That was something that I loved doing. I had to stop doing. And there were a couple of us that were in the same position, and we went to our art teacher and said, is there some way that we can still do art? But it wasn't something that was possible. So for me, art was something that I stopped doing, age 14.
Yeah.
And then 2020, I started doing Inktober, and that means that I have for the last 470 days, give or take a couple of days, been practicing some element of an art skill every day. I wouldn't say that I'm an artist. So when I put the pictures up on Instagram, which I've done every day for the last 470 days, I might tag it art, I will tag it drawing, but I don't tag artists of Instagram or artist, because I don't think of myself as an artist. But then I think, this conversation just a few minutes ago, I was thinking, well, if I go into hobbycraft, which, for those listening in other countries, is the kind of UK's big box craft and
Hobby Lobby,
shop.
Like a Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby.
Yep, that sort of place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the translator.
I can buy art supplies. If I go into, there's numerous other sort of department stores and kind of, but even kind of supermarkets where I can go in and there's a section that's labelled art supplies. So if I buy something from that section, I have bought myself some art supplies. If I then create something new with those art supplies, I have made some art. But I don't necessarily think of myself as an artist.
Yeah. But you could if you wanted to.
But I could if I want to.
Yeah.
So even we might say to, if we say so, if you get a 3 or 4 year old who's making a drawing with some crayons, and it's recognisable as a butterfly or an elephant or whatever, you go, that's you're such an artist.
Yeah. What if it's not? Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't have to be, of course.
Is that artistry without literacy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, I go into so Allie's eyes go like that. I went into
you said the words.
Yeah. Usually
I went into Mill Valley the other day, which is a farmer's shop. It's a shop for farmers. I went in, I bought some farming supplies. I didn't use them for farming, but I still used them, and I used them for their intended purposes. But that doesn't make me a farmer. Like,
it might.
No, it doesn't.
Did you farm a thing? Did you grow anything?
You do.
Did you grow anything?
Did you grow any plants?
To be fair, they were kind of building supplies, but it was building supplies from a farm shop. Like,
Did you become a
But it
builder?
was the building section of the farm shop.
Right. Yeah. So you're an artist.
No.
Use those supplies. Because you don't need to use art supplies to make art. You can
No,
make
exactly.
art out of
And
anything.
Yeah, I think that was kind of more what I was getting to. Is I don't think you need to define it by the fact that you bought something that's classed as art supplies. Like it's not the materials that make an artist. You can make art from literally anything. You can make art from your voice.
Yes.
And I think I understand why you don't class yourself as, or why you don't tag yourself as an artist in those things, but you are creating art.
Yeah.
Like those drawings are art. They're not design. They're not. There is an element of craft that goes into them, but they are art. No, that is a tool. Shut up.
Yeah.
Right. I love it.
The collection
not the X.
is kind of the art too, right? Like the whole process of Andy doing the same thing, and building his skill and trying to become an artist. By doing it for so long. I mean, if you look at it, he's made more art than I have in the last year and a half for sure. He's definitely worked harder.
Yeah, I think you qualify.
I don't know. Your screen printing is taking quite a lot of work.
Yeah, because it becomes a body of work, doesn't it?
But I can't do it every day. I can't. I find it hard to be that, be creative every day. And maybe that's just.
You find it
It's
hard
also
to be
been a really
creative,
tough
or-
year.
I find it hard to create or find time to do it along with everything else.
Time. That's
I can definitely
the trick.
do it every day. I'd love to. Yeah.
There
You
we
know,
go.
one thing, I think Steve brought it up here a while ago. I think in response to some rando thing I can't remember now, I think that I'm willing to give up art, a piece of thing that I make, and I'm willing to give up control of that to the point where someone else can call it art or not. I am at this point unwilling to give up the control to give anybody else in the world the power to define whether or not I'm an artist. So
Sure.
the object,
which again is a
you
thing.
got it.
Yeah.
me, I've got my thing. Defiantly, obstinately, I am what I am, and I'm okay with it. And beyond that, it's, if something that I make affects a situation, Steve, you were talking about, downtown Bristol being affected by those pieces.
Yeah.
Those street art pieces. That's cool. I mean, that's what it's about, right? It's
Yeah.
changing its environment. Somebody gave that life enough to transmit emotion. That's crazy cool.
Yeah, that's a win. Like, that's a win.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now, whether or not that person is a craftsperson or an artist at that point, I don't care, because they won.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's like defiantly, I'm okay with the weird. I'm okay with me. So if however you need to define me, have it. I mean, have a go, because
It's like a nickname. You don't get to choose it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Huh. That's
Dudley,
actually very
Dudley
interesting.
Harvey, about a quarter of an
that's a
hour
good one.
into the chat,
Right.
Yeah, nearly 2
said
hours
he
ago.
only calls himself an artist who's applying for an arts grant. Aside from that, he
Yeah.
doesn't care.
Guys, would he like to help me apply for an arts grant? Because those things
Yeah.
are impenetrable. Jesus.
Number one, you have to call yourself an
Absolute
artist.
wordsmith.
Yeah. I mean, I got that bit.
There's such an important thing there. Labels just do not matter.
But
Yes,
also
if you're
use
applying
what
for a
you
particular
want.
position,
Yeah.
Yes.
then
definitely.
applying that, it can be important. But a label doesn't actually matter whether somebody else chooses it or whether we choose it to ourselves. I can make art but not consider myself an artist. Steve can make an axe or a knife, and that can invoke an emotional response in the recipient. And that's okay. He doesn't have to be an artist. He doesn't have to consider that it was art when it was made. And several times through this conversation, kind of, as often does, the physics pops into my head. And at one point I was thinking about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And at another point, the last sort of thing that's come to mind is sort of the idea of quantum tunneling. And the idea that you can have at a quantum level, you can have two particles that are actually some distance apart that are actually interacting. And I'm kind of
I
sort
love
of
that I
trying to
actually know what this is. Like,
produce. I've got this kind of
Tardigrades.
this model.
I was about to type.
I've
Why
got
do I
this
know
kind of
this?
model generated in my head that when it comes to art, it's not about the artist. It's not about the recipient of that art, whether that's something that's been received as a gift or whether that's something that is just being viewed in a gallery or just on the street. But it's almost a kind of a melding of the two. And sometimes it's kind of going to bulge more towards the artist and what they were intending, and sometimes it's going to meld more towards the viewer and what they're receiving. So thinking about the voice, I was very fortunate to work with a colleague, one of a fantastic teacher, now head teacher of a school, and his subject was music. His instrument was his voice. And to hear somebody whose instrument is their voice perform, it's just wonderful. It just the ability to just intone emotion through essentially the throat, but it's the emotion that you receive, not necessarily the emotion that he's experiencing. But that, for him, it was his craft. But it's also then when you're listening to something and there's literally goosebumps rising up on the back of your neck. And for him, he could just stop and go, yeah, for him, there's no emotion after that, but you've still got the goosebumps for minutes later.
But the thing is it's not him the performance is the craft. The writing of the music is that's the artistry. That's the creation of the thing that's going to evoke the emotion. He's just executed it in a very good way. So he was a very good craftsperson, for one thing better.
But you could say the same about the musicians and the composer and the writer. All of those things are a craft component.
Yeah.
It could be, the art could be at any point along the way. The art could be, assuming it is, written by someone else and then musically composed by someone else. They could have all put artistic input to create this overall performative art piece.
Yeah.
Well, arguably, every person's interpretation of it changes it slightly. So the person singing it, that is their interpretation. No one else is going to be able to create it in the same way because they don't have the same voice.
Covers
and
of
so
poems.
that does add a unique spin to it, which could potentially create it as art, make it art.
I would argue that yes, it creates a unique spin to it, but it's the original concept, the original piece of music that was written down that's the core art. It's like taking a photo. Like, so say again, going back to the toilet on the street and taking a photo of that, the photo is the art, but then how you tweak it. So if I was to go to Bristol, take a photo of a toilet on the street and then give it to each one of us, and we all slightly tweaked it, or sorry, if I gave it to all five of you and you all slightly tweaked it, and you might have put a little bit more contrast in it, you might turn it to grayscale, you might do this, you might do that, you might add a filter to it, whatever. Those are all different interpretations of the same core piece of art. Does that make sense?
But in the musical idea there, so something like interpretive live jazz, scatting, or something that is like a jam session, something that isn't ever written down, it isn't something that is done with intent other than in the moment. Where does the art fall in that? But you've got three musicians who just make art.
That's a collaborative art piece.
Right.
The problem with what you're trying to do, Steve, is you're trying to quantify it. You're trying to quantify a point where below this point it's not art, and above this point it is, and that's impossible to do.
You can't put a nail in a puddle.
No,
because you took using the example you gave, which is one of you took a photo. You took a photo of a toilet. That's art. You gave it to all of us. And you said we slightly changed it, and that makes it not, and that's not art because we only slightly changed it. But if we changed it more, if
make it all black with like a white stripe in the middle.
If we took the photograph and created something distinctively different and new with it, then it's art. So, like, what you're trying to kind of pin is that point where below this point, not art. Above this point, art.
Yeah.
It's funny because, like, arguably people have been doing this for years, and it's called basically kind of copyright law.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what was coming into my head.
Yeah.
Like it's that sort of, if something has been changed beyond a certain point, it's no longer copyright infringement. And if it has not, and then it is. And so, like, people are obviously going to have slightly different definitions of like where that point is. And and so it's a very tricky thing to pin down, because arguably you took a photo, you hand it to a bunch of people who are creative and said, do whatever you want with it. Chances are that they're all going to create something that is unique art based on other art. So I guess to go back to the singer, like, it sounds as though by your definition, the act of simply singing it is not changing the original piece enough to make it a new piece of art. But obviously to other people, that line is somewhere else, and therefore the person's particular vocal inflections and the uniqueness of their voice is enough. Now, I do think this starts to become tricky when you are, like, if somebody is a person who is not necessarily, like, I don't know that we're qualified to make very strong statements about music.
No.
unless somebody here is a musician.
My dad's a record
As I say, Jamie might.
Yeah.
My dad's a record producer who deals with all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go. Admittedly, I was chuckling a little bit because I was like, I am actually a trained singer, but I haven't done it in a very, 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 very long time. So, like, I don't actually feel qualified. But but I was chuckling a little bit at the description of singing so emphatically, Andy. You described it so beautifully and, like, so emotionally, and I was just like, oh yeah, no, singing's great. Singing's nice. But yeah, no, it is an interesting one, and yeah, like Jamie said, there's whole jobs around this stuff, defining what is where the line is and where it isn't. Because there is a point that you cross the line and it does become new art.
100%.
Based off another art.
Personal interpretation as well, isn't it? Although they're trying to put a legal definition there, everyone's viewpoint is going to be slightly different, which I think is why it is such a grey area and why it is such a difficult thing to pin down.
Yep.
You know, I know I nearly broke Dave before by saying about you can't nail a puddle, but that's why you have that kind of thing of the only way to make a definition between classical art and modern art is to freeze that puddle. You know, if you can stop something and then define what came before it, everything else is a new something. And you do exactly the same thing with pretty much everything in life. You know, especially anything vaguely creative. You know, if it's distinctly different, we talk all the time as makers about the difference between, you know, 3D printing, digital fabrication, lasers, CNCs, Shaper Origins. All those things are now not traditional making, but then we all use power tools and still call that making. So the dude who grew up with just hand tools, trained by 5 generations of just hand tools from the very first stonemason that decided to start doing stuff. Well, then, you know, if you took that person from time 10,000 years ago and brought them to modern day scruffy dude in a high-vis jacket, a beanie hat, and with a hydraulic, you know, jackhammer breaking a piece of marble, would they be impressed or would they be aghast that they weren't there with chisels and, you know?
I mean, we talk about this within the blacksmithing community a lot because people get really irate. They're like, oh, you've got to do it traditionally and you've got to dress up like you're living in the 1600s and all this. Bollocks. Absolute bollocks. If you brought a working professional blacksmith from the 1600s to our workshop and said, here's a 25-ton press and here's a 15-kilo power hammer that strikes at like 3 strikes a second, have at it, he would go, this is fucking great. I'm loving this.
Yes. Like, I'm sorry, I can do what now? Like,
all that these tools do is they provide efficiency. They do not change our ability to be able to produce something. They just provide efficiency. It's same with like a CNC. Like, you can 100%, you can sit there and you can get your little router and you can go and or fucking Dremel or whatever, and you can carve out these shapes out of the thing, or you can get a bit of plastic and a fucking lighter and you can hold it and you can really, really carefully like do layer upon layer and build up a thing, or you can just like a fucking machine and do it like
Or
efficiently.
you can write letters to 5 of your friends, stick them in the post, and they'll go on a ship across to America and then carried on horseback to Andy and Dave. Or you can jump onto StreamYard and have a chat for 2 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's efficiencies of technology.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is going completely off topic, but it really fucks me off when people will be like, "Oh no, you're not doing it properly." You fucking are. You're making a thing. It doesn't matter. Right. Again, going back to what Ali was saying earlier on, like, it doesn't matter if you're creating art in a digital format or in a fucking quill and bit of paper. Like, still fucking making something. Oh,
it's gatekeeping again, isn't it?
And admittedly, I very much had a bee in my bonnet for some time when I was quite a bit younger about digital painting, because it was like, oh, but it's cheating, isn't it? There's an undo button, you know, like, and it took me some time to get the stick out of my arse to realize that, like, that's bullshit, and that actually digital painting is brilliant because there's an undo button.
Yeah.
It's true though.
Yeah.
Like, I can do semi-transparent layers, and I can change the transparency without, I don't know, going back in time. Like,
so with photography,
it did take me time. It did take me time.
I learned how to use darkroom in the 80s, and I've done dodging and burning. I've spent hours and hours in darkrooms. Do I ever want to go in a darkroom again? No, I do not. The stink of chemicals, the time it takes, trying to you knock something over in the dark. It's mate, give me Lightroom or Photoshop any day of the week.
Well, my job on CAD all day, I'd have been on a drawing board, you know, make a mistake, put a line in the wrong place, and I've got to sit there for 20 minutes with a razor blade shaving the bit of paper off to then remask the back. Or I can click it and hit delete. You know, but
that's
those things, that transition is the same kind of gatekeeping that we see everywhere. And it's just that kind of pretentious gatekeeping that I think separates art from craft. I don't think there's any reason why art, craft, design, and all the rest of it can't live under the same bubble of
exactly.
I genuinely think I am so much better for basically being able to embrace all of these things.
Yes.
Yeah. How much easier is it to get an idea out of your head to someone else if you can use a medium to do it?
Yeah.
Allie, I'll take that one step further, and that is, I will say that a lot of the larger pieces that I do would be, I wouldn't have the work. I wouldn't get the opportunity to build them if I didn't hack and cheat my arse off. Because they would be unaffordable.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be impossible.
If I'm going to carve what we call a crocket, a little detail of Gothic acorn or whatever, and I need 400 of them in a big piece, I am going to carve one and take 10 molds and do them in a week. Rather than 2 years of carving and I blow my elbow out.
Yes.
Going back to the hammers, the power hammers. I'm going to preserve my elbows and my knees and my shoulders that are, all tore up. Hey man, I did that for way too long. Bite me, give me the easiest way to do it, and I'll make it happen.
I think particularly for your work, Andy, I think people forget that the majority of, say, cathedrals and churches, particularly like you go back to the UK, where they're considerably older than perhaps the ones over on your side of the pond. Take a cathedral; it may have taken 25 to 30 years to build, and they would have had hundreds and hundreds of people working on it. There would have been a master stonemason, and they would have had, literally dozens of people working under their sort of control, and the same with the carpenters when it came to the kind of the insides.
This applies to digital stuff as well. When I was doing more kind of like 3D art and stuff like that, like if I need to create something that has a bipedal, like a humanoid base, I'm not gonna make that from scratch. That's insane. There are literally programs that will allow me to input data and will generate me a base humanoid shape that I can then create on top of,
Right.
and I will save myself a week of work, like that, which is like, hey, money, you know, like, because this is work, like that is legitimate. The thing that I'm creating is still 100% unique and looks nothing like the base model, but like I'm not gonna create a human from scratch every single time. Like
You're using a tool that is available.
bonkers. Yes,
Yes.
literally available for purchase. Like, it exists for a reason. So
If my wife asks me to make her a coffee, I'll go and grind some beans and boil some water. But I'm not going to go and grow the coffee plant.
You're not growing the beans.
Make a coffee roasting machine.
Unless you are that YouTuber who literally does everything from
Yes.
scratch.
Well,
Right.
That's why we have YouTube, to see why that is so much hard work. And why it is nice to have the convenience of a nice digital machine that does the things for you.
Yes. Admittedly, part of this is the reason why I'm finding myself currently very curious about production ceramics, because it is still very much done by hand, but they're mass producing pieces that need to be more or less identical. And I'm just like, all right, so there's tricks here. I want to know these tricks, because this shit is done by hand still.
Yeah.
There is not a machine involved other than the wheel. But like, you can produce 20 pots in an afternoon. Reveal to me your secrets.
But that's production all over. Like, doing production stuff it's repetition. So, you know, you create
but there are also tools that help.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say is, so you create an initial design and then you look at it and go, right, what can we do to make this easier? So we do it with blacksmithing all the time. It's like, right, we'll make something, we'll make it completely by hand, and then we'll go, right, well, to do this bit, it's going to be much easier if we make a jig, or if we make a bolster that goes here, or if we create something that will go in the press that will stop at exactly the right thing. And you create those things based off of that original piece, and then you find the efficiencies. And what ends up happening is you do single processes just repeatedly, like the amount
you also get
of,
faster at it.
Oh god, yeah. If you've got to do, say, skewers, for example, when we were doing the skewers, I could forge out 200 skewer points in before morning coffee break.
What?
But yeah,
He's a machine.
but if you were to tell me to make something completely different, but that was still just skewer point, or not skewer points, but like still just simple tapers, I'd never be able to keep that level of work, because it's pure muscle memory. And I know some people that do production pottery, and they say it's exactly the same. They're not really paying attention to what they're doing. It's just muscle memory of shaping where it's going.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on from that, Steve, I think we're thinking of the same production potter in our heads there, of our friend Heidi, who does a lot
yeah. I was thinking of Barrington, but yes.
And Heidi's a good friend of ours, and she says when she's making like a production run of something, she's not aiming to make, identical twins. She's aiming to make cousins.
Yeah.
They are close enough that if you've got 10 of them on the bench in front of you and a person comes over to buy one of those things, they can look through those 10 things and decide which one of those that they want. And it's a different type of production run there in that sense.
Yeah, I do
they're
think
individual
there is
pieces, but they're very, very close
wiggle room.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also just I love ceramics. It's just so fun. So
again, it's a dark art, isn't it?
It's just vaguely unobtainable to me, so therefore I want it.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, do this other thing. Do this other thing that isn't the other 18 things that I know how to do and do well. Do this other thing.
ADHD brain itching away.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
I confess.
So let me throw another word in then, instead of maybe artist. For those that are perhaps more inclined to the variety of making. So we could say, that person who is just a painter, and I don't use the just lightly, but the only thing they do is painting.
They paint. They're specialists.
Yeah, they only paint oils, and that's all they've ever painted. That's their art. But for those perhaps that are maybe more inclined towards the neural diversity, perhaps instead of artist, would the word creative be a better phrase
I
No,
use that
for
all the time.
the no?
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, I was gonna say it sounds pretentious, but it's but it does make sense. Yeah.
I use it all the time. I use it all the time because it does actually feel like it encompasses more. I also kind of hate it because it's very vague, but that's maybe a me issue. And relates to the previous conversation about labels.
Yeah. Right.
And does actually remind me that there was a thing that I had wanted to say, but then the conversation changed and I forgot. But I suppose to not necessarily, this is not a devil's advocate thing, partially because I don't. Internet's ruined that. But no.
Be the Steve you want to be.
Yeah.
I would reframe it to say that labels do matter. However, that you are free to make them to be whatever you want them to be.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
they don't matter in the sense that, like, you need to take the labels that are thrust upon you. But I definitely disagree with the labels aren't an important thing, because I am somebody who labels have been life-saving because they have allowed me to find community and people like me. And usually the labels aren't important thing is something that is leveled at me to make me invisible.
Yeah.
And
To take your self-chosen label away from you.
Exactly. So labels are important. However, they're not important in the sense of you make them be what you want them to be. I've honestly, I have personally struggled a lot recently with labels in the sense of who I am as a creative, because I do so many things that I can't easily label myself as a painter or, as a, gosh, yeah, I can't even think of any good examples. I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm not this, I'm not that, because sometimes I'm a little bit those things, and sometimes I'm a lot of bit of something, but none of those words really feel accurate. And so, I have, for the most part, just referred to myself as an artist and a maker and sometimes a creative. And it's always felt a little, I suppose, lacking, if only because of the way that labels are important. And it depends too on where you are and how, obviously there's a difference between labels here, because we are all very much kind of whatever. You are whatever you want to be, and whatever word you use to describe it is cool by me. But obviously in a professional environment, labels matter so much. They matter so much, and they are in a different language that is admittedly very frustrating if you aren't somebody who has existed in kind of a corporate or ultra high professional normal people world a lot. I very much feel like it is a language that is somewhat foreign to me, because I haven't really done that sort of thing in a little while. But I recently discovered a term that feels much more this is professional, but also is broad enough to cover the things I do, and it intrigued me when I saw it, because I was like, okay, I quite like this term. I like this label, and that's creative technologist.
Ooh.
Oh, there you go.
See, which sounds very much like something you'd put on a CV.
Yeah.
But also is accurate, because it's super broad and it involves being creative with technology. So it's cool. Right. Yeah. All right. That's accurate. But it's interesting because you are just determined today, aren't you? Yeah. Yeah, you were. You found all the little things and you want to play with them.
That's a Mabel distraction, by the way.
Yeah. She's this is the fourth time she's come to visit today. So yeah, she's here for it. Yeah, you found the nozzle. Well done. tiny noses. Perfect for cats.
Yes.
But yeah, like it is interesting because like I hate labels and also I feel like I need them.
Yeah.
And so it is that sort of, I think the important thing is the recognizing that you do get to choose your labels, which is why I seem like such an ass when I tell Steve that he's an artist. Because I don't get to choose.
Why Steve is refusing to be called an artist.
Yeah. I fully agree though. Like I meant to say when you first said about the labels earlier on, but I also got distracted and forgot. I think labels are massively important. I dislike how important they are, but I do think they're hugely important. And I think
they can be useful.
Yeah, exactly. And they can be useful for all sorts of things. They can be useful even as a defense, like in certain ways.
Yeah.
That's how you guys say.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think like a few people have said like you define your labels don't define you, and words to that effect. And I really like that. And I do think that it's important to be confident of how you define yourself, what labels you put on yourself. But I do also think it's worthwhile to pay attention to the labels that are put on you by others.
Yeah.
Because you might not necessarily agree with them, but
it's good to know what they are, though.
Yeah, it's good to because that's part of what you're putting out there. It's part of how you present yourself. So if you want to present yourself in a certain way, and you're finding that people are labeling you as something else, then you can go right.
It's not so much how you're presenting yourself as how you're being interpreted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But there are aspects towards how you present yourself that could be that. So if I'm constantly talking about art and being called an artist, then maybe I shouldn't talk about art so much. Like it's one of those kind of things. Shut up. And I think it's I do think labels are important. I dislike that they're important, but I think it's just important to be aware of the labels that other people are giving to you, whether you agree with them or not.
From a professional kind of corporate environment world, something that we've talked about earlier on about like architect and engineers and things like that, they're protected terms.
Yeah.
Right? So you then get into those kind of labels of, strictly speaking, you wouldn't call yourself an engineer until you are qualified and part of a recognized professional body, in the same way that you wouldn't call yourself, or you wouldn't be legally allowed to practice as an architect or a general practitioner.
Doctor, yeah.
Some of these things are more important than others.
Yeah.
But there's something
artist,
that
doctor.
Architect and engineer live in the same world as artist, maker, creative.
Yeah.
You have things like architectural technologists, which would be the people who are essentially the craftspeople doing the architect's work. The architect might come up with a core concept, and for professional time-saving reasons, you would pass that work down to an architectural technologist who is a lower qualified or less experienced person who's on a similar trajectory or has similar abilities in that sense.
I usually feel like I'm in the right place professionally when people struggle to define me.
There you go.
I don't think anyone can define you, Birkey.
Exactly.
The contrary.
Right there.
That's the goal.
To me, that's because I don't have a clear definition of I have a clear definition of what I'm evolving into or a goal, but I don't know where I am on that spectrum, and I'm okay with that.
Further than me.
Yeah. I mean, but to be fair, I think I and this comes from trying to define yourself online in whatever way that is. Like, so if you're putting a short little bio in or something like that, I think if you can define your entire personality with 1 to 3 labels or a single sentence, and that defines your entire personality, I think either you're lying or you're boring as fuck. Like, I'm sorry, but yeah, like
unless you just wait for a cover all like human.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Like,
then it's vague enough to cover a few things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like those labels are great starters, but they do not define your
They're
entire
just the
being.
beginning.
That's the beginning. Yeah, I like that. It's the beginning. It's where we
Yeah.
start. It's the start of
They
conversation.
give you a shape.
Yeah,
They give you a basic shape, which
Fuzzy
again
outline.
can be
they're
important.
the legs.
But
maybe they're the legs.
Sorry. Just-
But I think there are
back
some
here.
people who are definable by a very limited number of labels. There are people like that that ladder that I mentioned earlier who spends in excess of 6 hours a day practicing violin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
he
suppose if
will
you were a
be
specialist,
a
yeah.
concert violinist
he may
without a
not
doubt.
do anything.
I mean, he really has been a concert violinist. Yeah, his level is beyond. Yeah, he's in the top 1% already, and but that's his thing. Now, yes, he may have kind of, I don't know if he has other hobbies. There may be other things he's interested in. He was, certainly we had some very interesting discussions about physics. He had a very much an interest in sort of some of the things that happen in physics. But yeah, his career is going to be music. He will be very successful in that. That is his entire focus. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is neither here
just
nor
a
there.
thing.
One could argue that it's a thing, and it is his thing.
but I doubt very much that's his entire personality, though.
It might be.
Right.
No, but a significant
could be.
amount.
Yeah.
When
It might
you're
be.
that focused on something.
I
That
just
is
think
a
difficult
none of
thing.
us are like that. None of us.
No.
Are.
Yes,
focused
and
on
this is it. Yeah, I think everyone that's in this group now, and probably a majority of people who will be watching and will be listening, probably fall into that category of I like to do lots of things. Whether that is because they are neurodiverse, or whether that is because they just like to do lots of things. Because you can like to do lots of things and not be particularly neurodiverse.
I do think as well that we live in a world that does push people to become monofocused, and in being monofocused, you can become like your personality can disappear a little bit. Like honestly, a large part of the reason why I left the video games industry is because the people I worked with, they did one thing all of the time, whether they were at work or at home. They literally had a single thing that they did, whether they were a modeler or a texture artist or an animator. They had one thing that they did, and they would go to work and they would work on the work things, and they'd go home and they'd work on a personal project, and or they'd learn the latest tool in the software. They had one thing, and it did become their personalities in many cases. They had no hobbies. They had no other things. Like they may have had partners and families and done other things, but they just never really seemed to have much else, or they didn't succeed, because the only way you could succeed in such a competitive industry was to become the thing.
Yeah.
And it horrified me because I couldn't do it.
Is that another form potentially of neurodiversity? In that there's that. I mean,
That hyper focus.
that
I know what you're
hyperfixation, but it's a
talking about.
permanent hyperfixation.
I think this is more capitalism inspired, like
there's got to be some
like
Yeah.
like because again, to survive in the video games industry, you have to be very, very good, and the only way you can compete is to basically be like, honestly, I don't know how happy any of these people were.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
Like I and
They
I
were
know
doing
some of them
what they
aren't.
loved.
Some of them
maybe.
may have been, but I think a lot of them weren't, and I think that it almost becomes a bit of a Stockholm syndrome sort of situation. So I don't actually think it's necessarily neurodiversity I don't think that specific thing is. I think it is a symptom of the overlap between creative jobs and capitalism, exacerbated by a very rapidly growing industry that's very exploitative. But that's another conversation. And actually,
podcast.
also, it is midnight in the UK. Do we have we fixed the problem? Like, have we solved the mystery?
Have we fixed art?
Have we fixed it?
We've had the Steve intervention.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Like, I do admittedly feel like I've learned a lot. I feel like I've added many.
I think it's been a great discussion. Now,
I don't think we're ever going to solve it.
What I'd like to do, just to maybe round off, I'm putting you on the spot, really, rather than kind of going through, which often takes another kind of 45 minutes to an hour sometimes with Maker's Waffle, of kind of attention, and that's with one guest, never mind kind of 4 guests. Rather than kind of thinking about kind of attention grabbers, because I didn't ask you to prepare that anyway, what I'd like you, perhaps for the benefit of the audience and for me, because I might think, can you I'd like each of the guests to kind of maybe give either a type of art or an artist that you think people should go and check out.
Oh, Jesus. Hold on.
Just whatever comes to
You
mind
weren't going to
first.
put us on the spot. Jesus.
No, I am putting you on the spot. I am putting you on the spot with that
It
one.
doesn't count
Nice.
if you just point to one side or the other.
Yeah. So if you, I mean, thinking about some of the things we've gone through today, thinking about kind of, if I said to you, what's your favourite artist, or what's your favourite type of art? If you wanted to somebody to be
I can go
inspired
first on
by
this.
art.
Then. I know you said the guests only, but there's a fantastic videographer I think you should all check out. There's a guy called Steve House. He does some amazing art
Never heard of him.
videography for The Forge UK on YouTube. It's beautiful artistic videography, and he's
Why is Steve angry now?
because it's him.
Because it's me.
Oh.
You didn't know it was Steve.
No, sorry. I didn't realize it.
Oh, that's not as funny.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it all makes sense now. Fuck, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question because like there's
so many.
He said it wasn't going
Yeah.
to take 45
Yeah.
minutes, Andy.
as I say,
Yeah, I don't know. You didn't make it.
Yeah,
in short.
45 minutes of thinking time now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I say because like it's really tempting to pick out some of the photographers I follow, but in terms of like what's my favorite type of art, that's such a like mind melting question because again
Considering you just spent the last 2.5 hours discounting just about every form of art on the planet.
Right.
Yep.
no, I was gonna say like considering we can't even define what art is and
Yeah.
like because to me the best kind of art is something that evokes emotion, and like the stronger emotion it evokes, the more I like it. So whether you say that's music, there's plenty of music out there that evokes emotion for me. There's I don't fucking know, basically.
Well, just
I think
if
we
you
broke
had
him.
put it down this way, Steve, if you had a person that you would like the audience to be introduced to, who would it be?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I still don't know.
All
Normally,
right,
I'm gonna message Jamie to find out what I'm eating that night. Like I can't. Think
All right,
for
hold on.
myself.
Yeah, Jamie, what is
Tell me I'm gonna have
Steve's
to answer
favorite
your
artist? What did he tell you? What's his favorite artist? What did he tell you to remember?
So, someone else go. I'm gonna quickly see if I can find someone.
I'm gonna be a bit of a turd, and I'm going to use an artist that has long been an inspiration of mine, who is both not findable on Instagram and not even alive. So I feel like this would be such a great opportunity to like plug somebody, and I wish I could, but my brain doesn't work that way because I've been put on the spot. So, one of my favorite artists, modern artists, is a man named Alexander Calder. And most of you probably won't recognize the name because he's not the kind of person who is like famous in a very visible way. However, most of you probably have seen his work at some point, and you definitely know the thing that he basically invented, so he's not just an artist, he's an inventor too. He invented the mobile, as in kinetic art.
Oh, wow.
And the work he created was just absolutely astounding. I mean, the man was born in 1898. So, like, we're not talking about this is, modern art in, the 1980s. He literally died in 1976. So, like, it was modern ahead of its time. And he started with wire sculptures and then eventually moved on to kinetic art and mobiles, and eventually created things that were giant, massive things that moved. And so they never looked exactly the same. Like, depending on the angle you looked at them and the wind that day, they would look differently. And I found that to be incredible. And again, the fact that he integrated movement into his work in a way that he had no control over, I thought that was kind of amazing. So I've written a thesis paper on him, which is part of the reason why I know stuff about him.
Wow.
But yeah, his work is weird. I guess fair warning, he did a series of really brilliant wire sculptures of circus performers who are all naked. And so there's little tiny wire penises, which are just fantastic. Like, because they're incredibly simplistic, and yet it's a penis. It's just like, oh, yeah. Okay. Honestly, it's fucking incredible, because you're just like, it's a single piece of wire as well, actually. That's part of why it's cool.
Oh, wow.
It's a single piece of wire, like unbroken, continuous, that he makes an entire figure out of, including a tiny penis. So it's brilliant work. It's very brilliant work. And so that is actually what I recommend. He's American, or was American. And his work can be found all over the world, and it's very cool. So that's my recommendation.
Cool.
I should recommend somebody who's like alive and a friend of mine.
No, it doesn't have to be at
Instagram
all.
Followers, but that was what came to my mind. So
art doesn't die with the creator.
No, absolutely not. And that's one of the brilliant things, I suppose, about it is it can make you immortal.
I'll follow you down the dead guy rabbit hole. Maxfield Parrish. If you've
That name sounds very familiar.
He was an illustrator and widely panned. He worked. A lot of his work was in magazines. And to me, it was one of my first times that somebody manipulated colors that took my breath away.
Yeah, absolutely stunning color work.
Yeah, I've always liked his stuff, and I often have, done sunrise photography when the light is, those 2 or 3 times a year that you get the perfect light, and I refer to those as Maxfield Parrish kinds of mornings.
He also looks disturbingly like John Slattery, like the actor, like a lot. It's definitely a bit like, no, his color work is astounding.
These are amazing, yeah.
But widely, nobody in the art community dug his stuff because it was, cheapened and it wasn't very highbrow.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? You gotta die to have your work become appreciated. Yeah, no, honestly, like I have not seen many of his things, and I'm just looking at them now, and I'm just like, oh, I fucking love this. This is so amazing.
It's a rabbit hole, man.
It's beautiful.
Some beautiful stuff.
I would slather my walls in this.
Dave, Steve, either of you got one to go next?
Dave, do you want to go first? Because I'm still looking.
Sure, I went on my Instagram and I picked one of the thousands of people I'm following that makes cool stuff. And this is it's Michelle Chandra.
Yes.
Dirt Alley Design.
Yes.
I found.
Michelle.
She was on
I think I might know them.
Opposable Thumbs podcast one time, and just it's all like pen plotter art that's just amazing. But also, I think she like paints on top of it or does other manipulations
She totally
to them.
does.
Yeah, these things are so cool.
What's her name again?
It's Dirt Alley Design on Instagram, and Michelle Chandra. Yeah.
She was actually 100% like the entire portion of my talk about generative art was just her work.
Oh my goodness!
It's so incredible.
Yeah. It's probably one of the first generative art people that I followed on Instagram. But then
she's also incredibly nice.
Oh, I haven't. That's cool.
She's really friendly and really nice. And like, if you have questions about pen plotters, she'll answer them and stuff like that. Because she's basically a walking advertisement for the Axie Draw. So
okay, yeah, but just and it's different than some of the other stuff. It's just in some of the
that's a wonderful recommendation.
Nice,
so cool. Yeah,
nice.
I dig it.
Yeah.
Steve, you need a moment longer? Or?
No, I'm gonna follow Dave's lead and choose someone that's actually living.
Yay!
Yay, alive people. So I don't refer to myself as an artist, but there are artist blacksmiths out there. Fuck you, Jamie. And
there sure are. Yeah.
and some of the artist blacksmiths out there are fantastic. So you've got people like Pete, whose surname I can never pronounce. It's Brentsknix, I think, from Fireforge. If you don't follow Fireforge,
oh my god,
spelt with a PHYRE.
Yes,
go and check him out. It's fucking incredible work. And just from a crafts perspective, to see how he does it, as a fellow blacksmith, I find absolutely fascinating. It's insanely talented work. But that's not who I'm actually going to shout out. I'm
double shout out. I see.
Oh no!
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
great example.
definitely.
So the other person that I want to give a bit of a shout out to is Olivia Dansdotter.
Oh wow!
So yeah, there we go. So Olivia does just some absolutely stunning, beautiful work. She is self-proclaimed artist blacksmith. She's from the Åland Islands, which I think is on the Finnish border, but Scandinavian.
Oh, yes. This is cool.
Yeah. And she makes some really, really, really cool stuff. She is herself, like, I've had some interactions with her. She's a wonderfully lovely person. But the best thing about it is her and Hoops, whose first name I can't remember, but his surname is Hoops, another blacksmith. They have a thing called Forge Hour, which is basically, it's just a prompt to get people being a bit creative in the workshop, and it's a single single word, and you have an hour to just grab some scrap out of your scrap bin and forge something based off of this single word. So that cool. Word could be
I like it.
Or
it's really cool.
Bottle openers or whatever. And they like the stuff they make is always really, really cool, really interesting, really fun. And I think like Olivia's stuff is a really good example of both craft and artistry.
So, totally agree.
Yeah.
Looking at her work, I completely agree.
Cool.
You did remind me that there is another lady blacksmith that I follow whose account I cannot remember the name of course, because I need to know it.
It's not Ellen, is it?
No.
It will be. It's got to be, surely.
Oh.
Iron Maiden Forge.
No. What?
No.
Iron Maiden Forge.
There's a lot of
I'll send you Iron Maiden's thing in a
Yeah, she's great.
there's a lot of forged.
Of course, this is the one day that I get no posts on my Instagram from her.
Yeah.
Like, God, what is it? Why can I never remember the things when I need? The Path of Fire. Yeah. No, she does really cool stuff too.
Who was that again? Sorry.
The account is the Path of Fire. I was gonna say she goes by a few different names, so I'm not sure which one to use. But the Path of Fire is the account. I think Faye's Forge is also used, but the Instagram account is the Path of Fire. I think with dots in between. I just had it up. Of course, I just turned off my phone because I do that. But yes, it is late.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I am in Pumpkinville. I'm turning into a pumpkin, I think.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I'd just like to say thank you to all four of you for coming on and having fantastic chat.
Thank you.
I'm sure we can. Somebody suggested that we should have another one based around make space, maker, and the rest. I think that could be a good
Art
chat
versus
at some point.
making.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally.
It's a similar topic,
yeah.
but it is different, I think.
You've all been guests on here before, so people can go back to the individual episodes to find out where to find you and to sort of see more of your work. So I think on that note, it's all just all say good night. And
thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.